and there, but like that was the first time I actually started. I watched you at length, and he just like, when you called him out on it, that was freaking him out even more.
Yeah,
he was like, you need to let me make my baseless assertions, and I thought like by sticking to your guns, that was really great, because most people don't would let people get away with nonsense like that, and you did a great job, even though the moderator was like begging you to just let him keep doing what he was doing.
Yeah, James's moderation is not the best.
Well, in general, though, every time a moderator, if they even appear to take sides, there's always like people talk about it for weeks and weeks and weeks afterwards, and so a moderator has his or her own credibility to worry about. But and normally, like in every other debate, I've probably seen like presidential debates and stuff. Like, of course, yeah, moderators shouldn't be taking sides, but I think that's the only time I've ever run across. And it's like, I really wanted to hit the moderator on the head and be like, he's abusing all the rules of decorum and decency, by the way he talks and argues. Yeah. So the you have to appear impartial, but at the same time, but I was saying though, but everything is on a case-by-case basis. So like if like one debater is just being disingenuous with their style of argumentation, forget about actually what they're saying, but their entire style is like pretty besides the point also, like.
And have you got tissues on your ears?
Yeah, sorry, that's me just stopping the sweat on my earbuds. Yeah, I mean, so while we're speaking of Daniel Hakiki, like I'm a religious Muslim, but I do, I have, it's not from. It wouldn't be the way Daniel Hakikatu goes about it, because it's like this reactionary fundamentalism, which like I had to grow out of. But I think like one thing he was harping on like recently on his own channel was there's Ilhan Omar, who is the U.S. representative from Minnesota, and she wears a hijab, but she votes, she's a Democrat, so she votes like pro-gay, pro-trans things. And as a religious fundamentalist, he like freaks out. So he had a big post on his channel about how she's anti-hijab, and I had to be like, she literally wears hijab in the U.S. Congress, so she can't, because she was supporting the protesters in Iran, the women who want the right to not be forced to cover up. And so like the whole crowd was just like piling on Ilhan Omar, and it's like, well, she clearly can't be anti-hijab because she wears the head covering herself. So his entire idea of being religious is being as reactionary as possible. Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Okay, let's see if Trey Jedler will join actually, because he keeps messaging me on Twitter as well. Like every tweet I make, he's like, oh, "Let's debate this right now." So I'll see if he'll join. I've shared the link around in a few Discords and things as well. So. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's just I had to refresh. It should work now. Share. Optimistic theology, dude. I like that. It's a nice name.
Thanks. Can you hear my voice, guys?
Yeah,
I can hear your voice.
Okay, great. It's like whenever I wear my headphone, like whenever I plug in my headphone, like weirdly, either my camera does not work or like my microphone does not work, you know.
That could be in the settings where it like selects your default device, because I had to deal with that too, because I have like 3 TVs and they would switch the audio from the default microphone, or the default like speaker from each of the different TVs whenever I'd plug it in.
Would you mind just muting yourself when you're not talking, though? Just because I think you've got like quite a lot of background noise coming through as well.
Oh, okay. Sorry, just.
But if you're about, but I think you're about to say something, so don't worry. But just when you're not talking.
Yeah, I'm going to mute myself right now.
Okay, I thought you were about to say something though as well. So don't. If you have questions for Tom, that's kind of like the point of calling in, I guess.
So, Tom, if I could,
Yeah.
Nathan, you've been making more explicitly atheist videos lately instead of just generally agnostic.
Oh, I did want to ask about that. Are you an atheist again? Because last time we talked, you were a Christian.
Yeah, I'd say atheist now. Yeah. I think last time we talked was probably about a year ago, really, almost to the day. I mean, it might be a couple of weeks, give or take. So, yeah, I think the position felt too strong for a while, and it felt dogmatic. And I think that's largely because of basically the rhetoric of apologists as well. So it's kind of, it's like so I think almost one of my first debates that I watched online actually was when you debated inspiring philosophy back in the day, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, right?
Yep.
And I remember you saying like I'm a naturalist to IP, and I remember him saying like, oh, you don't want to be as if it was like a dirty position or something, as if you just said I was a Nazi, the way he kind of reacted. And I don't, I didn't know anything really about naturalism at that point, but I just got the impression initially, well, yeah, naturalism must just be this really kind of repugnant position that only a kind of lunatic would adopt or something. And I think that they do a similar sort of thing with like atheism as well. So it's, well, if you're an agnostic, it's more sort of, you're responsive to reasons from both sides. It means that you're aware of all the arguments, but you're not being really dogmatic. But I don't think it has to be like that. I think you can say, look, this is the way that I think the world is. But if there are some good reasons to abandon this position and be a theist, I'm still open to them in principle. But I just don't actually think there are any gods that exist. And so it's like, yeah, that's actually a good description of my belief currently.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference in the way that it's seen from like a colloquial perspective versus like an academic perspective, because like there's that common retort that, well, can you prove God doesn't exist? Well, then you can't be an atheist, it must be an agnostic kind of a thing. And that sounds reasonable to most average everyday people, because you would think that you would need to be able to prove something to really claim you have knowledge. And it's not until you really look into the philosophy that as long as you like have some kind of evidence to make it more probable than not, then you can claim you have knowledge even if it's not certain. And without understanding that, it seems like you're taking on this massive burden of proof by being an atheist to say that you can prove there's no God, when really you're not. It's not really what it means. And that's why
it's sort of like
popular atheists are like, well, what we mean by atheist is there's no reason to believe. That's why they did the popular definition instead of like the God does not exist one, to try to avoid that kind of criticism.
I think it's sort of like if you go up to the average person, right, and you say, well, what's your argument that shy intuitive fairies don't exist? Well, most people aren't going to be able to provide you with an argument, but they positively don't believe in shy intuitive fairies, just because if you were to ask them to list like everything that they think that exists, shy intuitive fairies just wouldn't be one of the things that they think exists. It's just, so you can cash that out in that way of like, well, yeah, they're just kind of like ignorant or lack of belief. I think that's one way of doing it, but you can say they positively don't believe for some people who have maybe thought about such things as well. And I think that, yeah, the way that theists kind of try to present the discourse is as you said, like you've got to have this argument against the position, but that just, it's more like it's just an entailment from naturalism, right? So if your position, if you kind of slide more towards a naturalist worldview for metaphysics, whatever, as I happen to have done, it just sort of follows that there aren't any gods that exist, right? And it doesn't mean that you're not open to changing your mind or anything like that, but that's the way I've gone.
Sure. What were you asking? What's your name? I can't see it because it's blocked by the settings thingy.
No.
No.
Hey, yeah. Well, thanks. So I wanted to submit something to both of you as official atheists now. So look, I was a religion major in college, and we studied Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud as part of our religion courses. And so what if let me concede to you, Nathan, that naturalism is the way it is, right? Because it's, if nothing else, it's incredibly useful. Like I have a profound sense of divine influence in my life. But sure, like I mean, naturalism does explain everything. I'm not gonna, there's not much basis for me to challenge that. Basically everything. And the more you think about it, by the way, the more profound it is. Our evolutionary history. Like I was just watching a YouTube video of like someone pointing out where the glaciers were moving in his state of Rhode Island, and it's just so incredible to think about. Like 200 million years ago, ice was like flowing like a river, for to use a metaphor, and just scratching up the rocks that we all walk around. It's pretty amazing, actually, just rocks, and geological sense of time is pretty profound. But so what if, though, drawing off Carl Jung, these are myths that we live by, and these myths came about, because I actually really like Sam Harris, because he kind of concedes that there's probably something in our human biology, psychology, hardware that like allows us to have a religious experience. And so in
Sure.
every culture, you have like very ascendant men and women, and then like a cult or following develops around them, and then those grow into the major world religions, and this gives us profound meaning. Would you have an opposition to someone carrying out their life just understanding it that way?
Do you want to go first, Tom?
Sure. I mean, I think we definitely have an evolutionary drive to make us religious. I think that's why it's so popular. It's like type 1, type 2 errors, I think, is probably the biggest reasons, and anthropocentric fallacies. And I think that you should always prioritize what makes you happy over what is true. I think happiness is more important than truth. So if it does make you happy to be religious, you should absolutely do it, as long as you're not like crashing planes into buildings or whatever. Then yes, I would think that happiness is way more important than truth, and you should only pursue truth if it's something that's like important to you.
Yeah, I guess just I broadly agree with what Tom said. I mean, obviously, I think that our cognitive faculties have evolved to have like religious experiences, to see like teleological explanations in things. And I think there's all sorts of evolutionary mechanisms as well involved in people like adopting religious identities, for example, to demarcate what kind of groups they belong to and for social cohesion and stuff as well. Now, that I don't think can justify just any sort of religious belief, though, as well. I mean, because I think I can also tell an evolutionary story about, for example, why I might get angry or like want to kill someone or something like that on certain occasions. And that doesn't mean that I ought to do those things, just because I can kind of tell an evolutionary story about where those faculties come from. But I also don't think it just completely undermines it for everyone as well. So the type of religious belief that I'm really bothered about sort of disavowing people of is where people's religious commitments where there's like a competing epistemology with mine that then makes truth claims about the world, right? So if someone's religious beliefs are basically about making them happy, maybe there's a few kind of like ethical things where then they participate in a social group or they love their neighbor or something like that, I'm sort of fine with that being the way it is. But when they start saying, the world's 6,000 years old, or you shouldn't get a blood transfusion or something like that, that's when I care about kind of like disavowing the person of their religious commitments, because then they've now like adopted a kind of competing epistemology with mine. Now they're making claims about the way the world is that come into conflict with the way that I think the world is as well, and I don't think that that's okay when there are like bad behaviors that lie upshot of those beliefs. Do you want to say something? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So like, I got really excited about this because like my channel, my YouTube channel, is to counter stuff like that kind of stuff, fundamentalism and like traditionalist views about like eternal hell and stuff like that. And like when Tom said, like, I think like he said like happiness matters more than truth, right? And I mean, I think I agree with that somewhat. But what I would say is that like in apologetics, there's this like they would say stuff like you should not, go with your feelings or moral intuitions, but go with what is true. And it's like they pretty much appeal to like their books, scriptures and stuff like that. So it's like it's almost like question begging. It's like gee, they just get so we just end up discussing whether their scriptures are true or not, and whether everything in those scriptures is true or not. You know, like because if like I think Tom, you are a moderate deontologist, right?
Well, I'm a moral realist, not a deontologist, though.
Okay, you are just a moral realist. So do you have any sort of normative ethical view, like
Yes, I think there is an objective morality.
yeah, I mean that's like a meta-ethical thing, right? Like yeah, objective. I'm also a moral realist, but like normative ethical theory, I mean, like, do you subscribe more to like utilitarianism or consequentialism or like a
Well,
sort of
I have my own version. I wrote my own model of morality, so you could probably interpret it to be a some kind of consequentialist in the vague sense, where it's the best thing to do is the least involuntary imposition of will or something.
the best thing to do is
The least
sorry,
involuntary imposition of will.
okay, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, like, I want to ask you, Tom, like, you have debated a lot of people. You have debated a lot of, people who have this kind of divine command view, sort of like traditionalist views, right? Uh, so, in your view, how would you like, if you had to like perhaps persuade people or just like give them a sort of like small pieces of evidences, to not like overwhelm them or anything, but like just uh, help them escape the sort of traditionalist mindset, like what would you do?
Well, my goal has never been to convince people, so I don't try to change people's minds. I think that if your goal is to change people's minds, the best way to do it is to present facts that are incorrect about the holy book, and um, that there's a better moral system of like why the Bible is immoral or whatever. And those two things seem to be the two factors that convince the most people to leave the faith. So if you're trying to convince people, you should focus on the factors that cause most people to leave the faith, and those would probably be the top two.
Is it always like the facts that convince them? I think I've heard that like even like I think there's a book written by a philosopher of science about how to convince people out of like flat earth and those kinds of beliefs. And facts do play a sort of role, but they are not, I think, sufficient or like enough to
Well, so there was a poll. There's been several polls done of atheists asking why did they leave the faith, and it's like the top two answers by far are, one is scientific contradictions with the Bible, and it was in America, so it's biased towards Christianity, but it was scientific contradictions with the Bible and reality, and the second one was moral contradictions and like LGBTQ issues and the Bible being morally corrupt. And so those are the top two reasons most people polled had left religion.
So yeah, if anyone wants to call in who's watching, by the way, the link is just at the top. So I saw someone called Elder Drazi who might want to call in. Seems like they'd be fun, just going off of the name and logo.
So
If I just wanted to, okay, go ahead. Actually,
yes, so I wanted to ask you, Nathan, like you made recently like bad apologetics video on like Swinburne, right? Swinburne, and some people were quite annoyed by that. Like they
Well,
were.
yeah, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense, right? Because he's someone that's not particularly been addressed. So they've kind of gone, they've been able to sort of justify why they don't hold to the sort of kind of arguments that someone like William Lane Craig puts forward in light of all the evidence against it. They've gone, yeah, that was too simplistic. That was back in the early days. But listen, now I'm off the milk and I'm onto the meat, and I've read this Swinburne stuff. It's crazy. And I think by going through that, we kind of showed how really weak a lot of Swinburne's proposed explanations are, right? And I think that is very frustrating for a lot of people. So, for example, Kyle from Christian Idealism, his initial criticism was that the series is called Bad Apologetics, and because he likes Swinburne, we shouldn't have him in Bad Apologetics, right? And it's like, well, what's that actually got to do with what we had to say about how bad his explanations are? Nothing. For start, it's stuff like that that's basically just emotional based, really.
Wait, this could be a good argument. Like somebody recently sent me on Twitter the Muslim apologist tier where you got like S, A, B, C, D were the things. And so if comparatively Swinburne is like better than all of the other ones, then you couldn't call him bad, right? Because he's like D tier, wherever else is
Well,
like
yeah,
F tier.
that's relatively, yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think there's such a low bar that you would have to call that good apologetics, like relatively right. But I think the point of the series is just to have a name and then to call out the ways that these arguments fail. And it's like, well, look, the argument still fails, even if you dislike the kind of name of the series that we've called it, and don't think that this person has to go in that particular series because of the name.
Sure.
But sorry, anyway, I interrupted the rest of the question.
Oh, hello.
Hey,
Hi
how's
there.
it going?
Not too bad. Well, yeah.
What were you about to say? It is really bad, and then you went,
Well,
well.
let's just say I've been better. I got a vasectomy a few days ago, so I kind of have that instinctual response when somebody says, "How you doing?"
What did you really want to say? Like, what's gone wrong?
So I guess it's a little rough.
Okay. Can we help?
Well, not with that. But I'm sorry. I got like I got bad echo.
Have you got the tab open on the other? You need to close the
YouTube,
tab.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I
chat.
definitely muted YouTube.
We do not hear it, so it's only on your end.
Yeah, I think so.
Huh, weird. Okay, well, yeah, I guess I can deal with it. I was watching you guys. A friend of mine sent me the link and they said, "Hey, you should go join this."
What is your position? Are you a theist?
I am a deontologist.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Okay.
Well, kind of. It's like, I guess that's a really interesting question. So whenever somebody talks about God, I say, like, what does God have to be God to you? Because there's a lot of different criteria.
I'd say creator of the universe, mind of some kind. Those are probably the two big ones.
So I think creator of the universe is, for lack of a better way to put it, I don't mean to load it, is like kind of an immature view to have of God. I don't understand why creating the universe rather than being part of the universe or like a collective of so I guess the way I think of it is I'm matter, right? I'm conscious matter, and I can form thoughts and I can understand that I'm matter. So that's just like at this level. I can't discount the fact that all the matter in the universe could also manifest consciousness as well.
Okay, so you're like a pantheist.
I'm sorry, what was that? The
So
echo kind of.
Pantheism is the view that God, the universe is God, that it's like a collection.
Well, I certainly can't discount it. I think any larger amount of like matter than like the kind of beings that we're used to, like humans and animals and all that, if it was like a larger collection of matter and like energy that has emergent consciousness, we'd probably call that God, no matter how expansive it is.
Okay, if no people existed, would there be any centers of consciousness in the universe?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat
Yeah,
that?
sure. So on your view, imagine that the Earth gets blown out of existence, right?
Mhm.
And there's no people, and there's no aliens as well, just to kind of rule that out. Would there be any kind of mind in that world? Would there be like a center of consciousness?
In the world, like I don't know. There might be. It just seems really silly to say that consciousness can only arrive at like this scaling. It seems really weird that like I would say it's probably
Why
less
does
like
it
when we
seem
go
silly?
down. Well, because I don't have any reason
I
to
mean,
justify
you
it.
maybe just mean like not argue for.
Do you think if I have a headache and the doctor puts a band-aid on my toe, that's like just as good as them putting like an ice pack on my forehead?
No. So I guess the idea is that I know that matter, like the building blocks of the universe, whatever you want to call it, has this property that says it can become conscious, it can become aware, it can become self-aware. And I don't understand why we limit it to where we're at. And it seems incredibly biased. And it seems like we're limiting the understanding of what that could potentially amount to. And we know that it's not just humans. We would certainly say that animals have consciousness as well. We're seeing things through this lens at our level, or like our scaling of existence. And there does seem to be some kind of suggestions that the universe behaves like really fractally. Like we have like our atomic structures look a lot like planets and things like that. And we see like a lot of really similar patterns throughout nature. So it just makes me, I have no reason to think that at this scale, consciousness can only exist within this like tiny little
here's
frame.
one reason though. So the previous question that I just asked, right? So
Mhm.
imagine you have this headache.
Mhm.
Are you going to put an ice pack on your forehead, or are you going to put an ice pack on the table over there? And why would you potentially do one of those things rather than the other? If I mean, isn't that just an arbitrary bias that you'd put it on your forehead rather than on the table?
No, because I've seen ice packs on tables and they didn't affect my head, but I've never been able to experience a larger collection of matter and how it would experience it. You're kind of like, it's kind of like me saying that if we knew for certain that there were beings on like another like exactly where we're at, just like parallel, and we knew it for a fact, I would still have no idea how to tell you like how to explain what that would feel like or how I could like fathom any of their experiences, but it wouldn't make it any less true.
Okay,
Right?
I guess I
Just because
just
something's not like able to be grasped by us doesn't mean it has to be disqualified. Like we know for a fact that matter has this property.
right, but just because we can't disqualify something doesn't mean that we should believe in it. It just does nothing either way.
Sure. Well, my reason to believe is that I know that matter has this emergent property. I just don't know where.
Hang on. Come on, you said about
stops.
20 things, and I
Sorry.
think we need to sort of slow
That's
down a
fair.
little bit and maybe like stick on some individual claim, and then maybe we'll be able to make some progress, right?
Okay.
So I heard you say quite often that that you just didn't have any reason to kind of prefer the idea that consciousness only exists, for example, in things like brains or nervous systems over anything else, right? Is that correct? That's what you believe?
It seems like that's how we experience it. It seems to point that way. Sure.
Okay. So why is it that, for example, you might not want to step on a puppy, but you don't mind stepping on the pavement?
Because I
Because
can.
for all you know, couldn't the pavement be experiencing pain in the same way that a puppy might?
Yeah, sure, that's possible. I don't have any reason to think that it does. What we would say as pain, how we would identify pain, there is nothing that signifies that to me. But when we're dealing with something but this is still like, these are all things that are easily
isn't that a
viewable through our
relevant
lens.
difference, though? Isn't that then a relevant difference between the two? Isn't that a reason to think that, in fact, okay, you can't absolutely rule it out, but because there's no discernible difference either way, it's not a reason in favor of it either. So maybe we think, okay, the puppy's in pain if we stand on it, but the pavement isn't. Isn't that a relevant reason?
Okay, sure. I think the reason why we're talking past each other on this is that you're attributing consciousness, which is true, to like biological organs, which is absolutely true here. But I'm also looking at it and saying that it's kind of a fantastical thing that the whatever makes us up, like I don't know if we how far down the like chain of like quanta we want to go, but the things that make us up can form in a way that has the emergent property of consciousness. And it seems like this
Well,
works
I don't
really
think
well.
it's emergent, but I would say I
Well-
agree that it's like really cool that there are conscious things.
Yeah, so I know that matter has this property. The matter arranges itself in a particular way. Consciousness is. Experience happens. So when we go up in scale as well, there may be ways that it can form to have something either identical or similar enough to where if we could interact with it, we go, oh, this is like what I experience. It might be a little bit different.
Yeah, okay,
Similarly to
sure.
how our experience to an ant would be different. The ant could never fathom us.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So I think that this is the argument that a big universe looks kind of like a brain, right? So the universe is probably conscious like a brain if we think brains are conscious. Is that sort of what you're saying?
I would have never put it into that framing. It's just as simple as that. If matter can become conscious, because I am conscious matter, I don't feel super comfortable saying that it has to be exactly like this. It has to be within a frame that I can examine and interact with for me to say that this is how it has to be always. It
So
just seems like,
for all we know, right, the universe at a large scale is conscious.
yeah, there could be a collective
And-
consciousness of all the matter for all we know, and it would
And
be
for- and
impossible for us to
similarly-
interact with.
Similarly, for all we know, the universe at scale isn't conscious.
Sure, I would say the only thing that leans me towards one rather than the other is that we know that matter does have this property
A
to
particular
become like self-aware,
scale.
aware
Would-
and then
right.
self-aware.
Would you say the same thing about every property that matter has? Like water is wet. Is the universe wet?
I would say that the universe can be wet. We'd have to look at it in its entirety and determine like how much wet versus dry, and then we could come to that conclusion. Sure, I would say I wouldn't know, but maybe.
Yeah,
Well, so one
I
of the
don't
things.
really know how to answer the question if the universe is wet. Like it has wet parts. Maybe that makes it wet.
There's a lot of wet things in the universe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the things I'd say is seems to be this property that information can't travel faster than the speed of light, and the universe is big. So to think that there's like some kind of contravening consciousness that spans the universe doesn't seem to
Mhm.
make sense to me, because even if the universe was an entire big brain, there's no way for the idea to go from one side of the brain to the other because it's just too big. And so I think that
It just goes slowly. Like
Why are
a
you
slow
ruling
thinker.
out? Why are you ruling out non-physical thoughts in the Uber brain?
Well, I was going to say, I might give you some fuel to meme on me here, but it seems like when we change scales in physics that the same rules don't necessarily apply. Even when we look at, there's a lot of things that we can't explain about the behaviors that we witnessed in like large celestial bodies that don't seem to line up with our ideas about physics. And certainly when we first discovered the super small parts of the universe, it broke all the laws. They were like, this shit goes right out the fucking window. So if you take the entire universe, which is we have like estimates that are based on what we can observe, and I have no.
Well, I think we understand, right? It's just gonna. This is just kind of, I guess, to drive the point by saying, yeah, it's like pretty wild, whatever. But I think an identical argument can be constructed. You know, as Tom was sort of suggesting for wetness, but I think you could do it maybe for like the universe photosynthesizing or something, right? Like something like that. You could just say, well, look, like photosynthesis, it takes place at this particular scale in the leaves of plants. But I mean, look, planets and solar systems are kind of like atoms in a way. And then you get at this big scale, and the universe is actually kind of like a leaf that's photosynthesizing at the big scale. And you can make it an identical argument, I think, for that. For all we know, it's like that. I mean, you can't provide me the reasons against. And
Maybe it is that like photosynthesis seems to Eldrazi more like a mechanism, and consciousness is more like this, I don't know, like private essence kind of thing, which you can't in principle detect.
I guess I don't understand why that makes a difference, though. If the relevant feature is that there's something that exists at a particular scale that doesn't at another scale. And so the way that the argument's working then is that for all we know, there's a similar thing that happens at a further scale somewhere up, right? And I think you can just make the same case for photosynthesis, where you say, well, photosynthesis, it works at this medium scale, doesn't work at the smaller scale, but for all we know, things come together at this bigger scale such that they're photosynthesizing there.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. And there's two things that I'd really like to like strongly impress here. Is one, that I'm certainly not professing certainty here. I just think that it's important to not discount this idea, because if we're going to consider God,
Wait, why is it important?
Idea. Well,
What-
I was getting there. So if we're talking about God, which would be say like, can we at least agree that in this context, when we say God, we're talking about like a larger, higher consciousness? Is this like is this vague enough to like meet the qualifications that we'd all agree on?
I don't understand what higher means, but larger, sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to.
Do you mean like
really
very
spread it
powerful or
thin.
something? Like
I
maybe
don't know what a
maybe
very
that
powerful consciousness would entail.
Yeah.
I'm
high.
speaking very fuck, I always mess up the word colloquially. I can't say it right. I always mess-
colloquially, yeah.
Yeah, when I say like a higher consciousness, do we all have like a vague general sense of what that means?
I don't think I do in the sense that you're using it though, because when I think
I would
about
use
what
it in
you're
the same
saying,
way a Christian would say that God is a higher consciousness.
Is it like he's worth more than us or something?
That it's more expansive. Like it's something
Yeah,
it's
bigger.
something so yeah. Like I agree with bigger or higher. However you want to imagine something that would be more than what our consciousness is.
more in what sense? Like value?
That's such a weird way to ascribe it. I think that we would inherently value
Worthiness?
something like that.
Well, it's like, so size is an option. It could literally be a bigger brain, or
On a cosmos level. For the
Yeah.
cosmos.
Like I mean, that's why I think it's really interesting to ask people what God has
I think
to
a problem-
be anyways.
Because the
So
problem
like,
with going the size route might be that you'd say, you know, like if you get like these giant aliens, right? Are we going to call them God? Or like
Yeah,
blue
which is-
whales? Should we worship blue whales?
and they could be just really big, but also really dumb too.
which is why I'm trying to see if
Yeah.
like there's definitely a vagueness when we talk about God, no matter what. And so like I'm just trying to
agree.
appeal to this vagueness that when I say God, you have an idea in your head of what that means. Everybody in here has some idea of what that means. Nobody goes,
Yeah.
"What the fuck? You just made a sound and it registered nothing to me."
No, I
So-
understand. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think you can get away with this given what you've been saying about your characterization of God being this kind of big brain, right? Because that certainly isn't what I have in mind when I hear the
don't-
word God. I sort of think of
I don't like-
something that's sort of perfect in various ways, incredibly powerful, has various kind of desires for mankind, ex nihilo, creator of the universe, like that. I mean, obviously that you can have variations in that, but that's typically the sort of thing I'm thinking of when someone says God, rather than like a really large brain. And even when we look at brains, you know, like the vast
Probably would
majority
become
of the brain is to do with like coordinating motor function, right, rather than thinking. So you know, if you get like a massive brain, then maybe like all of that extra gray matter is just coordinating all of the extra space moving around within it or something. Like, I mean, so I don't know what like spatial scale really does here for me.
I think we have to kind of switch. I have to sort of take the position that you just hit me with and say like the brain is a kind of like a really silly way because it's like if we want to say consciousness, sure.
But I don't consciousness. I wouldn't think of as spatial, really. I guess, at least in the way that word is used by ordinary speakers of the language. I mean, in my theory, it obviously is spatial because it's identical to brain states. But
yeah, I would say that's one of the things that makes consciousness and God so fascinating and unique to think about. Because like, if there's anything in the entire world that is like it's as close to supernatural as we get, it's as close to magic as it exists. It is something that we like really don't have any idea about. It is the most phenomenal thing that's like that we can imagine is consciousness.
I think
You
I
can't
disagree.
quite
I think
put your thumb on it.
I think magnets are way more supernatural.
Get out of here.
How do they work?
Like,
You can
I
only
don't-
think that because you're conscious. Just saying.
But how do they work?
But like they just move. That's insane. I mean, I'm sort of serious when I think like we just made a mistake where we placed magnets on the like natural side. Like they should just be on the supernatural side. That's they're insane.
Same with gravity as well. That's pretty weird. Like,
I'd go with entanglement. I think entanglement is pretty supernatural.
More than consciousness?
Yes.
You know, TJ, you said a little while ago that you don't see how, because it's at the speed of light, you don't see how God could communicate from one side of the universe to the other. But as you know, quantum entanglement is faster than light.
Yeah, but it's not information
Based.
traveling faster than light. So even though
Yeah.
it causes collapse, you can't transmit information from one side to the other.
Well, entanglement
That
kind of
is
implies
true.
that it's no travel, right? It just is.
But you can't use
Yeah,
entanglement to
connection is
transfer information
instantaneous.
from one point to
Right. So
Um,
what entanglement is that there's two particles that are entangled that
Yeah.
are infinitely far apart, and measuring one will cause the other one to collapse to be the opposite spin or whatever. But it's not
Yeah.
like you can make it be spin 1 or spin 2. Like if you could make one always be spin 1, then you could transmit spin 2 to the other side of the universe instantly. But it doesn't happen that way. So it's not like it's still going to be random whether it's spin 1 or spin 2. You're not actually conveying
also,
information.
that's on like one of 3 interpretations of quantum mechanics. That works. I mean, we're not even sure that's the right one. I want to Nathan. Did you used to be a panpsychist a while
Not
ago?
really. I mean, I think
You had an
I think
idealist.
I was probably an idealist for a phase.
Yeah.
And I think that this was probably as I deconverted from Christianity, but was left with all the like heavy metaphysical baggage of the theists and stuff. And so it was like, well, you know, I'm just going to go into this position that's as weird as possible because I'd been kind of socialized into philosophy in that way, I think. But
Yeah. So I used to flirt with panpsychism, which sounds similar to the thing you're mentioning, Drassi. And you know, I can relate to the sort of thing where you're like, well, I know I'm conscious, and presumably other people are conscious as well, and presumably monkeys, and
Yeah.
presumably mammals, maybe lizards, and at some point it feels and it sort of feels arbitrary to but not mice, or
I wouldn't say that.
And you just feel,
Yeah.
but it feels weird to put in a stopping point, and I get the sort of simplicity charm of saying hey, let's just not stop.
Yeah,
let's
put it
just
everywhere then.
whatever. yeah, whatever. The way I wouldn't be well, I have a weight, and other mammals
look,
has a
I
weight.
can't tell you.
Presumably not flies, right?
I can't tell you exactly where the border of the country is, so the country must be everywhere.
Well, I didn't. That's the thing too. You keep acting like I'm proposing certainty about this. I just
No,
think
it's
it's
not
really
certain,
good to keep
but
in
you're
mind.
saying something, right? If you're saying something, then it has to have some content to it. It can't just all be so I think you can say something clearly, but be like, I'm not very confident in this. So that's what I'm nitpicking about is actually adding content to what you're proposing, not how confident that you are in that particular content, right? But if it's just vague,
it's just way faster to not add in all the steps of vagueness that you all the hesitations. So maybe it sounds like he's proposing things that you wouldn't say because he's not adding in all the caveats. Let's say, have you seen the game where they place there's a quiz show and they get to place money on each option. So there's some question what's the capital of Iceland, and there's 4 options: Reykjavik, Oslo, Stockholm,
Multiple choice.
Gothenburg. Yeah, and then you have you start with $1 million. So then you get to place your money as much money as you want on each alternative. And then all the wrong alternatives, the money will drop. So all that money will disappear. So if you're really confident, you can just place all your money on Reykjavik. But if you're unsure, you could place your money, sort of split. Let's say the question was is the universe as a whole conscious? And there was 2 options, yes and no. And you had $1 million. How would you place them? Would you place most of it on yes and someone, or would it be 50-50?
I'd probably hold on to $100,000.
So wait, that's 900,000 yes, 100,000 no. Okay.
So the thing is, when I'm talking about this, I get caught up on a lot of silly things is the universe a leaf? When it doesn't seem to be.
I don't think that's silly. For all I know, the universe might be a leaf. I have as much. So what I don't. If you don't want me to call your view silly, if you don't want me to call your view silly, please don't call views that I think are on epistemic parity with your view silly.
Okay. Well, I guess with as far out as I've been able to explain my idea, that probably tracks. But with as much as I consider my idea, before getting questioned about it, it does seem silly when I have my whole idea in my head. Does that make sense? I'm saying that what I actually think that would be silly.
So
I agree. Yeah, sorry.
What evidence do you have to think that this is more than just possible, but it is the case. So I think it's like it's logically possible that the universe is a leaf. There's just it's a giant leaf of some kind, but I don't think there's any reason to believe it's true. And likewise, I think it's possible that the entire universe is conscious, but I see equally as little reason to think it's true. So, do you have any reason to believe this is the case, other than simply the fact you think it's possible?
Sure. So I think that one of the reasons why it's worth considering is there a God? Is God at all? Is that for pretty much as far back as we go, God's been on the table. Why?
Well,
When
this is a
somebody
reason
says
to
to me,
consider the view, but it's not a reason to think it's actually true, right? I think that's what Tom's asking for, justification for the view rather than why it would be important if it was true.
Okay, well, hold up. Let me finish it. So God has always been on the table, and one of the reasons why God has always been on the table is that people report having revelation. I don't know how many other things where people have no contact with each other, where they all sort of arrive at a similar conclusion like this. We have cultures that expand through time, like vast amounts of time, all across the world, and they all have like really similar conclusions. And I think that indicates that there's something occurring here. And I'm not very comfortable saying like this person's right or that person's right, but it seems like there's a pattern.
How does your theory explain this data point?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
How is it that your theory explains this data point? So how is it that this sort of scaled up mind connects to any of this stuff that you're saying is kind of weird?
Well, so let's take for granted there is like a collective consciousness of the universe. Okay. I think that it's super easy for something at a larger scale. Like I can interact with an ant and like a conscious level that makes sense to me, that would be completely out of the ant's ability to grasp anything that happened. And it would be like the craziest thing it's ever experienced. So like going from up to down, it's kind of like we can perceive two-dimensional objects. Anything that's two-dimensional can never perceive
though,
us.
isn't it? Because an ant isn't a part
Well,
of me.
it is different. We're talking about God and humans and ants.
Yeah. So an ant isn't a part of me. I and an ant occupy different spatial regions, and I can interact with an ant like that.
Sure.
What you're proposing, rather than God being a sort of alien within the universe, it seems to me, is that God is in fact the universe. So how is it? What's your proposed mechanism of how this agent is interacting at these particular places with human mind to reveal itself to them or give them a sense of something more? Like what actually is your explanation here of the data points?
Wait a minute. So like, are you telling me in order to say that like my computer works, I have to tell you how the fuck it works? Like, sorry, I didn't mean to swear.
Well, no. If you're telling me, right, computers are weird, therefore shy intuitive fairies explain computers. I want to know what shy intuitive fairies have to do with computers in order for them to be a good explanation of it.
I think like an answer would be something like, if there is some mind, it talks to us and gives us ideas, and that's why everyone shares these ideas or something.
Well, that's what I said when people explain revelation and things like that. So I thought that was like off the table for explanation since I had already proposed this.
I think it's kind of weird, given that this mind exists at the scale, what I'm saying is what's supposed to be this kind of like mechanism here, or this rule of nature or whatever, such that this might, because I think just saying it just does, right, is just to kind of re-describe the thing to be explained, because you're not explaining anything.
Sure, I would say that if it is the case, it would be impossible for me to know how it does interact. Like, how does one know the mind of God? I think that would be a very, very silly question.
But then you don't have an explanation, right? You've just repackaged the thing to be explained.
Look, I can give like a test answer, like something that I think would satisfy like the sort of question I think Nathan is asking. So you could imagine that this giant brain somehow is like poking the nerve ends of like human brains, and it can sort of poke them in such a way to like give them information that they feel like, oh, whoa, like God is speaking to me.
Well, I think I'm uncomfortable making. I think the way my idea of how this God would function, I would be super uncomfortable proposing a way that it would mechanically work. Because if it does exist in this way, I think that one of the properties that it must have is that I would not be able to understand the mechanisms by no
So
more than a
let's
third
compare this as
dimensional.
an explanation to shy intuitive fairies, right? How is it any better than my proposal that shy intuitive fairies explain all of the various religious experiences that people have, right?
So when we talk about the makeup of them, is that something that we know to be real?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Explain that to me.
Well, because they're shy, right? So I never see them. So when all the times that I haven't seen them is evidence in favor of their existence. They're
I think you misunderstood
intuitive,
the
so
question.
I intuit that they exist.
You're misunderstanding my question, I think. So what I'm
Okay.
saying is that there is a consciousness that is made up of the same things that cause consciousness that we know exists, or like as much as we can fucking know anything. It's made up of this. So I'm telling you what it's made out of, and then I'm telling you why I think that there is evidence for it, and it is this result over here. I'm asking
Yeah,
you, can you
but
give
I've
me that
just
for your
said-
shy
I've
intuitive
just said that-
fairies?
I've
Can you
just
show
said
me?
that I've said that the data point you pointed to is actually evidence in favor of shy intuitive fairies, you see, because we have all these religions throughout history and people having religious experiences. And I mean, how do you explain that? Well, shy intuitive fairies, of course, because shy intuitive fairies have shy intuitive fairy society, and they want to interact with humans occasionally from time to time and cause them to have religions. It brings them a lot of entertainment to do this. It brings them a lot of joy and pleasure to interact with human societies and give people religious experiences and have them form different religious cultures. Now, you might ask me, how do shy intuitive fairies interact with people to give them religious experiences? But that's to say I have to know the mind of the shy intuitive fairies. I'm saying if there are these shy intuitive fairies, then that they're utterly beyond anything that we can comprehend. Luckily, they're intuitive, so we can know of their existence. But I mean, beyond that, it's pretty difficult. Can you see that what I'm doing is on exact par with what you're doing in terms of the explanation?
Sure. Can I pose a hypothetical to you that might help explain things? So let's take for granted the Christian God exists, right? And the Christian God wants to communicate to a person. Would you say that this would happen between one? I can only imagine it happening really one of two ways. One of those ways would be to speak English into their ear. Or would it have to happen through a more subtle means? Because God does not have a mouth while he is everything. He does not have a mouth, so he cannot speak English. So he would have to communicate in a way that the person who is supposed to receive the message would receive the message in exactly the way that they intended, because they are a perfect being and capable of doing this. Which of these two do you think would be how that happens? And now nobody could ever say that, explain how the Christian God did that in this hypothetical, but the person still received the message. Does the fact that nobody else can explain it in this hypothetical disqualify it? So we'd say, no, he must speak English in their ear.
I consider things that I can't understand or conceive of to be impossible, right? So
okay,
or
then,
just really bad explanations, maybe, like if your explanation is like
I don't even
something
understand
totally beyond that, I can't even understand did it. I mean, we can compare this to something that would be closer.
But just to respond on that specific point, though, of just saying, so the question was, it was like, but in this case, we know that God has in fact communicated with someone. So how would you explain that, right? And the thing is,
no, I'm saying, which of the two options would you think I gave you the premise. This is what happened, and here are the two ways that it might have. You'd say speaking English into their ear.
Well,
or maybe
I don't understand
directly.
that either. Because I don't actually understand what I'm supposed to be conceiving in that case, right? So how
God expressing a message to an individual.
No, but I'm saying because of my background knowledge about the world, about how sound waves work and so on, I just don't really understand what I'm supposed to be imagining. So there's a part of what I'm conceiving.
That's what I'm saying.
Where there's a part of what I'm conceiving where sound waves are starting to vibrate next to someone's ears, but I don't understand what's supposed to be causing them to vibrate, right? I don't understand how God's supposed to be doing that, what sort of causal powers God's meant to have. And so I sort of don't consider this to actually be a possible thing, because I just can't really conceive of what this causal power is supposed to be.
Okay,
what
then I think you should just say that you can't perceive the hypothetical where the Christian God exists and can interact then, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not sure that it's actually a coherent conception what's being put forward. It's sort of like
okay, fair enough.
It's sort of like if you're telling me about square circles or something, right?
Well, I wanted to go back to He said that because there's a consistency among beliefs of all the different people groups, why would that be the case? And I'd say that's the case for all fallacies, biases, illusions, delusions. Every product of evolution and interpretation of data is going to be shared among people. And so if I show them that optical illusion of the Rubik's Cube that has orange in the middle of both of them, but one orange one's she's really dark and one is really light, all humans that have eyes are going to share this perception pretty much universally. And I wouldn't say this is evidence that it is actually the case that this exists. I'd say because we have an evolutionary mechanism that causes us to have light cones that process light in this way, that's why they see these things. And I'd say the same thing would be applied to a god. The reason lots of people believe in a god is because we have an anthropocentric bias, type 1 and type 2 errors, that if we hear a rustle in the bushes and think it's a lion or a mind of some kind and we run away, that group survives. And if somebody tends to be more skeptical and be like, I'm going to wait for more evidence, that group tends to be eaten more. And so the group that always assumes there's an intentionality or a mind behind everything will survive more. And so there's an evolutionary reason why we think there's a god, not, which again wouldn't be evidence it's true, just like the Rubik's Cube isn't evidence that the two orange shapes are the exact same color, but is evidence that there's some mechanism in human evolution that caused us to have this particular belief be more useful than other beliefs. So why would the fact that lots of people have a belief about God give us a reason to believe there is such a thing on the universe scale?
Well, I said that not only do they, without communicating with each other, but they are so very similar. Now, if you want to say that the explanation that people came up with an explanation from God because they heard rustles and bushes, and then they came up with like these mythologies that are so remarkably similar to each other, like I've never heard a rustle of bushes. I'm like, oh shit, I get it. I know how this all works now. Like, why does that happen to anybody now?
What's the similarity, sorry, between all of the beliefs that people have?
It seems like humanity has had a consistent theme of interpreting deities, whether it be
what are the similar features between all of them?
That they have for the thing that you're going to pick at me and say like they are like higher beings. They exist like not in the same way that we do. That they are mostly imperceptible as they actually are, so we have to like like use metaphor and things to like describe them. They all have fantastical, impossible stories attached to them, and it just it seems like there is a very common theme that I guess if you want to say
that's not quite true,
no deities are.
So the Greeks believing
like
that the gods have physical bodies and live on top of Mount Olympus, right? That seems quite different from people who are classical theists and Thomists, from people who are ancestor worshippers. So,
sure.
I mean, I think you're sort of getting this free lunch on saying that people have all of these similar beliefs, when I think the content there is actually very different between them. And I think that's another part of
some
this.
people might have to interpret it that way. If you can't imagine something that doesn't have a physical form, you're going to put it in a physical form. I mean, let me put it this way. I'm not proposing that everything is identical. If everything was identical from all these different cultures, we would never have this conversation. I think that early enough people would have just been wholly convinced, would have all been on the same page, and we would right now take it for granted that whatever God that they interpreted would be God today.
Well, does that mean that's not a similarity? So if some people imagine God to be non-physical and some imagine God to be physical, I think actually the majority of them are closer to physical. Doesn't that mean that's not a similarity between the ideas of God?
Also, I want to...
When I say there's similarities, it doesn't mean... like you're just pointing out like, well, this is dissimilar, so that takes away all the other things.
It means it's wrong that they're similar, right? Well, what are the things that are similar that are important for establishing the argument, right? That was my question.
The things that I just stated.
So one of the things you stated was that it was common in all these cultures that these gods were imperceivable. I think it's kind of easy to explain why all... yeah, it's kind of easy to explain why all the cultures' gods would be imperceivable. On the hypothesis they don't exist. Like, you can't have a culture where everyone
that's
thinks...
not true as well. I mean, firstly, if they are perceiving them, then they're not imperceivable. But secondly, that's just not what people thought. Who thought that they're
he said most
physical beings that you can interact with.
He said mostly imperceivable, as like you don't see these gods every day. But that's really easy to explain, because like that's so easily falsifiable that like that wouldn't last long. But the other point, I think the more important point is that you said, look, we have a bunch of independent cultures and they all arrive at some similar ideas. But like in all these cultures, like the people have the exact same organs in their heads. They all have like human brains in their heads. That's a real similarity, right? So like if you didn't know that much science and you're like, well, I can build stuff. So I can imagine something that's like bigger than me that build bigger stuff. I mean, it's sort of an easy interpretation to make, right? Like even if it's false, like if I'm trying to explain something, I'm just gonna like, well, how would I do it? Well, I couldn't build a mountain, so it has to be like bigger than me. It has to be stronger than me.
I almost feel like there's part of what I'm saying that isn't getting through here, because it seems like I almost feel like you can't disagree that there is like that when you have matter arranged in a certain way, we get consciousness. And then to say like, well, this is the only way it's ever going to work ever seems very like,
well, sure, no one's
intellectually immature.
I don't say that. Yeah.
No one has pushed back on that, and I don't think that thinking
that is
of
my
those as
biggest
intellectually
qualifier.
immature
And
But
then
that's the
other
possible
things
thing. So that means that it's possible the universe is conscious. So we agree, but we're going a step further than
It's
that.
also-
Saying
yeah.
why should we believe it's conscious? More than just saying it's possible. We agree it's possible. It's possible the universe is a leaf, but why
Yeah.
would the universe being conscious be more likely than a universe being a leaf?
Okay, let me ask you this. Let's say, for example, I said, well, actually, I have experienced revelation for myself. And although I understand that my organs can mislead me and make me think things that aren't real and all those things, however, I am obligated to trust my reasoning and my perception of things that are, I have to trust my senses and my reasoning applied to those things. Otherwise, I can't trust anything ever, and there's no point in me talking to anybody. My presuppositions go right out the fucking window.
Just to clarify what I'm hearing, are you saying that in this example, which may or may not be actually why you believe what you believe, you're saying that you have some kind of revelation that isn't defeasible in principle by any reasons that anyone could provide you with?
Well, what I'm saying is, if I had a revelation, let's say, in something that I couldn't fully explain. Let's say I witnessed the infinite, and all I can really hold on to is the reasoning that I had when I was there, and I have to know it because I can't.
Was it LSD or psilocybin? Which did this to you?
I am posing a hypothetical here.
Sure. Okay.
So,
but are you saying it's not
to
defeasible in principle? Are you saying that wouldn't be defeasible in principle, that experience?
Yeah,
I think you started with saying like your brain could have misfired.
I understand goes out the window. If you're telling me, well, in this one instance,
so it's
your
not
senses
defeasible.
and your reasoning, well, I said it is, but if it is, then everything else about my experience, like all of my experiences are now called into question, and I shouldn't be sure of anything. My presuppositions go out the window. My memories go out the window.
In that very specific scenario, right? Well, then let's hope that nothing defeats that belief, because then you're going to go crazy, apparently. But in the case of all of the claims of divine revelation that people in fact have, so this would be revelation from particular gods, or people who have had psychedelic experiences and believe they've understood ultimate reality.
I would say they don't have a choice but to believe them.
Hang on, let me finish. In all of these cases, these people have been provided, there are examples of people who've been provided with alternative psychological debunking explanations for the experiences that they have, where it hasn't entailed that every single belief that they have has had to go out of the window in order for them to accept that explanation.
I don't know if they accept it. I would very strongly question that they accept it.
I've had upwards of 30 psychedelic experiences. At a time in my life, I believed that I'd come into contact with ultimate reality, and I now believe that there's a natural explanation for the experiences that I had. And just 3 weeks ago, I took mushrooms, right? And I thought that in that experience, everything that happened, I understand naturally now, because I've looked at the literature of the cognitive science and the fMRI scans, the Rebus paper by Robin Carhart Harris about what's going on in the brain during those examples. And I've not abandoned all of my beliefs about my experiences, my memory, what I think.
But wait. You're skipping a part. You're skipping the part of reason.
Why trust
So
my reason too?
yeah,
Yes.
correct. You're trusting your reasoning that you say, okay, when I examine these experience that I've had through my own reasoning, I have come to the conclusion that it was caused by a drug that is known to cause this.
Well, could you help me understand? You said if you doubt this experience, you also have to doubt everything else, all of your
Yeah,
presuppositions and things.
I would say if I doubt anything that I have experienced and I've applied my own reasoning to it while I'm experiencing it and it still holds up after the experience is over, then I have to trust it. I must. Otherwise, that's what
I'm
being
not
crazy
following.
is.
Wait, I'm not quite following what exactly that means. So let's say I see a leprechaun, and
It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You can
Well,
say, I'm holding
no,
a can of Red Bull in my hand.
Okay.
If I'm
Okay.
doubting that,
Can someone have a hallucination where
Wait.
they think it's true, and then they of a can of Red Bull, and they come to believe afterwards that that was caused by like a brain tumor or something, and it wasn't actually that?
I think Elder is saying
Well, no.
that
Wait, before you
would
go to
just
that,
be the
I want to try to
hallucination.
hold on. I want to try to understand his connection here between if you doubt his experience, he has to doubt logic. That part I'm missing. So
because
let's
I'm
say
using logic to interpret it.
Well,
let's say,
reasoning,
wait.
not logic.
So let's see. I see a leprechaun.
Thank you.
Now I'm using my logic and reasoning to try to see this. I can see it interact. I can talk to it, ask it questions. Now,
Yeah.
But is that using logic that like you just go, that's a
reasoning.
leprechaun, right?
Yeah,
You just
you're
see it.
reasoning.
he meant reasoning. He's generalizing here.
But even reasoning, right? You just go, that's a like, what am I
Right.
reasoning
So,
about?
so
I don't-
the question here is like, so let's say I come with some information that there's actually, I discover that there's a disease, a hallucination that's really common in humans where they actually see leprechauns.
Sure.
Now, if I'm presented with this information, I can doubt my experience, that, oh, maybe that was this delusion, but I don't need to doubt my reason, right? I can just say, oh, I just didn't know this thing.
You're applying your reasoning to the information that you now also have as well.
Right, but I don't need to doubt my
Okay.
reasoning. I just need to doubt in that case I
No, you
was missing
apply your
information.
reasoning in accordance with the new information.
Right. So couldn't you do that in the same case? You had this personal experience of this mind thing that's the universe, and you could say, oh, well, maybe there's this known psychological delusion that could explain that. And so I can say, maybe I was wrong about this being the universe, but I can still grant that I have reasoning abilities. I just didn't know the information at the time.
So this is what I would say. If there's this disease or whatever, then I'd say that before you can make a solid conclusion on it, now after receiving that, you got to find out if you have that disease. If you don't have that disease, then you got to stick with it.
So if it's a thing that
Then everything goes out the window.
So what if like every human
You got
mind
it.
has this disease?
That they have like a one-off shoot hallucinatory experience, and you're not hallucinating all the time. That you have this one experience, and for some reason you have this massive auditory visual hallucination that's tactile. And then
Do you know what
after it's
percentage
over,
of the
you don't have,
population
well, hang on, and
experience
you
have
have no
experienced
other symptoms
hallucinations?
whatsoever, and it just never happens again. That you're
Do you
supposed
know
to
what
consider maybe I
percentage
have
of
a
the
disease.
population? Do you know what percentage of the population experience hallucinations?
One time.
Yes.
No. Do you know what percentage of the population experiences a auditory, visual, and
10 to
tactile hallucination?
25%. 10 to
One time?
25%.
I think he wants to make it more exact, like that only experience it exactly once or something.
Most people.
I mean,
most
what-
people.
happened
But so if we just list one type of delusion, let's list one type called a bereavement delusion. A bereavement delusion is a kind of delusion where people will see, hear, touch dead loved ones. And
Okay.
they're reported by up to 60% of people who have a dead loved one will have a hallucination of seeing, touching, hearing a dead loved one.
Yeah.
It's very common. Now,
What's it
this is
caused by?
one of over 100,000 different types of fallacies, biases, illusions, delusions. These are extremely common. And we know this is a product of something particular called the brain. It makes mistakes, a lot of mistakes.
Okay. So to be fair, this is absolutely a cop-out. If you're saying that we're going to basically this is what you're telling me. Because we don't accept that they had that experience with their loved one, we're just going to say the brain made a mistake, and that's how it's going to be. This is no more
no, that's not
justifiable
why.
than
That's not
any-
why we do it. We
any other
compare the
statement.
theories. What we can do is we can look at the two theories and compare them. One of them's a better theory than the other one. So we
think when it
we
comes
don't
to
just
this-
reject. We don't
and-
reject what they're saying out of hand. We engage in theory comparison between the two. So we take the theory wherein they veridically actually did encounter their loved one, and we compare it to the theory wherein there's this kind of delusion within the brain where they didn't see that, and both of them entail the data point, right, that the person has this experience of seeing the dead loved one. Then what we can do is we can look at theoretical integration. How does this theory integrate with our other background beliefs and commitments that we have, right?
There we go.
What extra things do we have to
background
postulate?
belief is that doesn't happen.
Well, no. So
No, it isn't. Not at all.
We test this. We didn't just say it didn't happen.
Wait,
what we did was we
There's
took
one
the
thing you can say
testimony.
that makes me agree with you. Do all these people have some sort of physiological marker that's also associated with them having this experience? Do they have like a high blood pressure? Do they have like a certain? Okay, so there's nothing that I
They
can
have someone
medically
who's
test for.
died recently.
Well, no, the
Okay.
similarity here is the connection between the Abdullah oblongata and the hippocampus. So it's because there is a strong sensation of emotional release from the Abdullah oblongata that is released to the hippocampus. The neuroplasticity of the brain causes an expansion of those pathways, causing them to be more sensitive, which means you have sensations of your memories bleed into your conscious experience. And so you recall these things of your family that happen very often, like your dad's reading his newspaper and this happened every morning and now he's dead. Your body, when you wake up in the morning, you don't realize he's dead. The sensations will still come in because it's habit, and so you'll hear them even though they're not happening. And it's just a part of your brain that's activating because of other sensations that have happened
Is
in
this
your
always
life.
right when they wake up?
No, that's just one of this happen all
Okay.
the time in lots of different cases. This is just one example. But the similarity, the physical similarity, is that one part of your brain causes an activation in another part of your brain, which causes an imagined thing to be seen in your brain as a conscious experience when it wasn't. So this similarity.
Why doesn't this happen? Maybe it does. Maybe
Why
you
is
tell me
that
this
right
happening.
where you go to? Why don't you just
'Cause
stop for a
I'm
second and
hang on.
actually engage in theory comparison rather than immediately going, well, but what about like it's
Look,
so
I'm actually
defensive.
I'm actually trying to qualify what he says. Like, look, man, I understand you don't like the things that I'm saying.
It's
but
not that I
think
don't
I
like
think
them.
that I think I'm acting
It's
in
that I
better
don't like.
faith than
let's
you
let him,
think
let,
I
let him
am.
ask the
the
question.
biased way that you're reasoning.
Go ahead, Drazi. What are you going to say? Why doesn't this happen when what?
Why doesn't this happen then when there's other huge emotional spikes then?
It does.
Because I've had I have had and I've seen.
Now let's try asking a question
okay.
like that in the case of dead people actually appearing to people on the alternative hypothesis. Why doesn't this happen all the time when people aren't grieving? Right? What does that theory? Why is it that you only ask this question
because
in the case of the naturalized X? No, listen to me.
I can answer.
Why is it? Listen to me. Why is it you only ask this question in the case of the natural hypothesis and you don't ask these questions in the case of the supernatural hypotheses? You're only skeptical for one of these. Why is that?
No, I'm not. I'm of course I'm skeptical when somebody says that their dead relative has.
Yeah, but why are you not
visited them.
asking these same questions of the supernatural theories? As soon as someone offers a natural
I already know what the
explanation,
objections are.
you-
That's
you
why. Because I already know
Well,
what those
you didn't know, because
objections
when it came to your theory about this general mind, right? You hadn't even begin to think about the various content of that
Well,
theory.
hold
About,
on,
for
hold
example,
on.
what the laws are supposed to be, what the actual mechanisms are supposed to be that govern
You don't know
the
what I
relations
thought
between
of.
wholes and parts. Yeah, because I asked you and you didn't have anything to say about it.
I may not have been asked or considered exactly the way that you've said it, and also this is a different setting for me to be.
You just
engaging
didn't
with
have
this
an
in.
answer.
Look,
Okay.
Nathan, I mean, we're currently in sort of a heated discussion with Eldrazi where it's sort of established that you and him are very much on different sides. So I don't think it's strange that when you pick an example, like he's going to pick the other side. I'm sure that if you just started to
But what's
say we're
frustrating for me, Oscar,
supernatural.
but what's frustrating for me is that I tried to ask very neutral questions, right? And we constantly get this what about for all of these natural explanations, which is where the content is specified, right, to a
Yeah,
level
but
of
that's
detail
because
that we get nothing like in the opposing view. And I hate this bias. Like, what? It's so
No, but that's
obvious the bias in one
But the
direction.
context of this discussion is that you're on the naturalist side and he's defending the other side right now. Like this is not a
Well, I
situation
want to
where
get off
we're
the
like
meta. I
asking-
don't care about the meta. I want to go like so. In this case, someone sees their dead loved one. They're using their rationality to try to assess that they're really there. They can see them. They can talk to them. They can touch them. And here, I know of this. This is a very common psychological condition. So I
Sure.
seem pretty rational for me to say no. You probably didn't. You probably had a bereavement delusion. And there is nothing wrong with your brain. This isn't like a psychological condition. This is very, very normal for people to have, because normal brains have hallucinations. It's very normal. And you had a personal experience of the divine. Now, I see that as a very common, well-known delusion. And I see it as the same as the kind of the bereavement delusion and the kinds that people have with religious experiences. Like, for example, NDEs, near-death experiences. People will see their favorite deity. And kids who have NDEs will see a large, fat man in a red suit with a white beard, Santa Claus. When you have an emotional experience of some kind, it can shock your brain into having hallucinations. It's very common. And they happen for all emotions. Like you mentioned, this is not just for death emotions or bad emotions. It happens for happy emotions too. That's why people can have love hallucinations. Very common. So
I don't think that I disagree or don't understand that this is very likely the case.
My question more generally is like, why would you think your case would be less likely to be a delusion than all of these other cases?
So I propose the reason why for God, and these aren't one-to-one comparisons. I think we can agree that whether like God exists or not in the way that I said is not one-to-one to this. And I do have other reasons for that, some of which I've laid out, some of which I didn't.
Why are you adding
And
caveats
so
before you even said anything about the content? This is what's frustrating, right? It's such a weaselly explanation.
Okay, well, maybe you should get really mad if I ask you that. I'm not trying to be...
Well, no, because I can specify the content of the things I believe in detail. I don't have to begin by saying, just be really generous and charitable, please, because...
Okay, I guess I should do the things that work for you to help you understand, and not the way that's going to help me understand what he's saying. That would work really well.
What I don't want to do is have any of my positions falsified, guys, and I've got all these like wishy-washy explanations, and there's nothing that generalizes, it doesn't integrate. Like, just tell us what the actual content is of what you believe without all of these caveats up front. Why is it so difficult? And why can you not just objectively engage in theory comparison between the two without having to have all these caveats such that you never...
I don't know why. This is the way that I talk, and this is the way that I engage. You could just say, I don't fucking like the way you talk. Can we get this guy out of here? And that's totally fine, because that's what you're actually saying. You're saying, I don't like the way that you communicate. Fuck you. And that's fine.
I don't like your biases.
But you're being really underhanded about it. Like, cool.
I'm being direct.
Biases, I don't have a choice but to engage through them.
How am I being indirect? I'm directly accusing you of these things and saying that I don't like them.
You're saying I don't like it when this, but what you're actually saying is I don't like the way that you communicate. It's frustrating to me. It is frustrating.
That's not what I'm actually saying, though. No, because I'm not just saying that in general.
Why can't you do it like me? Because I'm
not saying that in general, right? My point isn't that I dislike the way that you communicate. My point is
the entire time you've interacted.
My point is in the context of the specific issue that we've been discussing. I dislike your biased reasoning when it comes to this, and I dislike the heuristics that you're adopting, which heavily prefer the supernatural explanations, and that the fact that you don't actually engage in theory comparison between the two is incredibly frustrating to me. Right? That's specifically what I dislike about your communication style. Maybe I like various other things about your communication style, right? Maybe I like the way you say good morning to people. I don't know, because we're not doing that.
Okay, I didn't know I had to be so hyper specific and say like I hate the way that you're communicating about this particular subject, and that's the particular subject we've been talking about the entire time. But like,
what is your point? What is your theory? What do you believe?
Well, it's a lot easier for me to, every time I've started to talk about it, you've cut me off and told me that I'm talking wrong.
Because you start waffling and caveating rather than saying anything. I don't want the waffle and the caveat. I want to just know what you actually believe.
Well, I guess maybe I should have made it really clear that I was talking to T-Jump and responding to him and not you.
Okay, maybe you should have. But now, what is your actual answer, right?
I don't know. I don't know where we were at anymore.
So the question...
You've been drilling me by why I'm not you this whole time.
Yeah, so the question is why should we think why should you think your personal experience isn't a delusion like the tens of thousands of other delusions that we know of that seem to be able to explain similar phenomenon?
So I don't know. It seems like I would have to ask you, who's given me this new information, a couple of questions. That way I can compare it against what I know and try to
go for it.
Suss it out from there, which is what I was trying to do. So when this happens, is this particular hallucination that you're talking about, is this strictly when people die?
The bereavement delusions are, but there are hallucinations in every context.
Okay. Is there any kind of physiological marker that we can associate with them?
Your brain. It's literally just the brain working.
You have a brain?
Yes. So it's literally just, this is how the brain works. So if you have a human brain, you have hallucinations. That's just how it works.
I mean, we can, like, the way sight works is you have like a system that's asking your eyes for things, and then sort of nerves behind your eyes are like answering yes or no to various questions. That's oversimplified. But like, what happens if nerves here start like answering randomly instead of like based on vision? Then you just get crazy hallucinations. That's just how it works. That's how it works when you're dreaming.
No, sight doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So
Well,
it's more
then,
that
okay,
the way
how
that
would I
your
know the
brain,
difference?
well, the way that your brain saves information is that there is a connection between your conscious experience and your experiences and your sense experiences. And
Mhm.
if your brain forgets to turn off that connection, your dreams or your thoughts will be saved as if they were conscious experiences. And this is a problem that causes the vast majority of hallucinations. Like if you have an NDE, the part of your brain that normally shuts off your conscious memory is still open. So all of the sensations you have are going to be saved in your brain as if they were conscious experiences when they weren't.
Sure.
And the same thing happens with dreams. Your dreams will be saved as if it really happened. That's where there's this delusion that you have where you can't move at night and you think you're being abducted by aliens. Same thing. So all of these delusions are just the brain forgetting to shut off the signal that is saved as conscious memory and imagination or sleep. And that's all it is.
Okay, then so I think I have two main questions that's either going to make you want to like choke me to death or go, all right, I get it. So the one would be that how would we ever know if somebody did actually experience their dead loved one interacting with them? How would we say that, like, oh no, this time it actually did happen. Every other time, this is the first time it's happened.
Novel
This
testable
is a miracle.
predictions.
What would that look like?
Be like,
And like, how would it compare to what you described?
so it would be like we would have some piece of information like ask your dead loved one this question that we know the answer to, that this person doesn't know the answer to. And you have a bunch of questions and say, okay, interact with their dead loved one, ask them what this shape is. I'm holding up a shape, you can't see it. Tell your dead loved one to tell me what it is. They're standing behind me. Go. We test it in one kind of way like that.
Okay.
Or for example, the brain regions that TJump is suggesting are activated. You could have someone in an fMRI scan and see that those brain regions were in fact not activated whilst the person was undergoing this.
Sure. My next question was going to be: have we ever ran a scan while this was happening? Have we ever seen this brain? Okay, that was important information for me to have. This is the path that I was going down because, of course, I have to ask that. Otherwise, like, I'm fucking crazy. So then the other thing that I would have to ask then is that how do I ever know that I'm not hallucinating? Because I operate always under the understanding that I am not hallucinating. And just like I said before, if it's shown to me that I have random hallucinations, then I still think that I have to throw all of my shit out because I don't know which parts of my memories are or not hallucinations. I don't know what is or is not real.
I can tell you how I do it. I do it with, like, you have I compare like what I experience with like general background information that I have. So like if I have a memory that my shirt is on the floor, and then when I look, it's not on the floor. Like, that could be because it teleported away, or it could be because my brain did something wrong. And then I'm gonna say, like, which one of these is more likely? Well, my brain doing something wrong is more likely. So then I say, oh, well, I just misremembered. And in other cases, I say, well, it's more likely that, like, well, this feels like I see Nathan, I say hi, and he says hi back. Well, then I'm not gonna think I hallucinate because that fits right in one of my background information.
I have a
You're also
slightly
taking for granted that you didn't hallucinate the things you're using to justify it as well.
I have a slightly different
because
answer.
it fits with my background information.
So
which could have also been a hallucination.
So a better answer
but-
is future testable predictions. So hallucinations are very bad at predicting the future. So if you have a bear that's trying to eat you and it eats out your organs and you wake up the next day, probably a hallucination, because if something was real, you'd probably be dead, and you're not dead. So one good way to differentiate hallucinations from reality is hallucinations are very bad at predicting the future. They're very bad at being able to actually know what's going to happen based off of this, if this is true or if it's a part of your imagination. So we can say if it's a hallucination, then we should be able to, or if it's real, we should be able to predict what would happen or what we would expect to see in the future if it is real. And if we don't see that, it was probably a hallucination. That's a good way to tell the
don't know if
difference.
that works. Like, I mean, I have many dreams where I like sort of become aware that I'm dreaming, and then I want to figure out if I'm dreaming. And I remember like doing some of those tests. I was I was flying, and I was like, well, if I'm really flying, I should be able to fly over there. And then I flew over there, and I was like, well, if I'm really flying, I should be able to do it. And I just kept dreaming that I successfully tested my predictions, and it just kept coming through.
Yeah, so I suggest you make better predictions, but this is how science.
So
really works.
what kind of prediction should I have made in my dream?
Okay, if you never flew
I could
over
always
France,
just dream that I like.
I don't care. I don't want to. I don't
Yeah.
care about the flying. I want to talk with Drazi here. So how do I differentiate imagination from reality? Very important question. Novel testable predictions. That's how I do it. So if I want to try to know which things I'm experiencing are real things versus imaginary things, I predict the future. I try to predict the future using them.
Okay, I guess one of the things that makes it a little bit difficult for me to accept it is a real example. Here's something I have actually experienced. One night, 12-ish years ago, I went to sleep, and my dream, in the context of the dream, lasted for 3 months. Like 3 months of dream events occurred in 3 months. And when I woke up, I missed people that didn't exist. I mourned the deaths of people that didn't die that are real, and I mourned the ethereal deaths of people that never existed to me, and it really fucked me up. I didn't really know how to handle that. But for 3 months, all those things were very, very real. It's not just like you have like this fleeting dream. I had like a good solid memory of the entire dream.
Yeah, and that would be so.
Do you think
if you were making
could you explain that
predictions-
to Tom? Do you think, given what Tom said to you before about the things that happen in the brain, do you think you could explain from his point of view what might be happening there?
No, I have no idea what causes you to dream for 3 months. That was insane to me. But maybe he could explain it to me, and I would probably take his word for it because he seems very knowledgeable about neuroscience.
Well, more importantly, to bring this back to my epistemology question, like if you were in this dream and you're making predictions about the future, say if say you're medieval times, you say, if this is real, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have a sword in my hand or whatever, et cetera, and that happens, then that would be evidence to believe it was real. So in this dream, if you had 3 months, a 3 month long dream, and you were able to accurately predict the future based off of how you think the consistency of the physics in this dream worked, and it happened, then that would be a good reason to believe you're not in a dream, and you'd be justified in believing that.
Yeah, that happened all the time.
I think you've been alive a little bit longer than 3 months. So in this particular dream that we are currently sharing, we've have 30, 40 years of things that we can predict about the future together. Like if this is real, I can pick up my cup and drink some water. It's very nice. Or when I go to my car, the car will start. There's lots of things we can test to make predictions about the future, how they interact. And some of them don't work. So sometimes if I see like a leprechaun, like if that's real, I should be able to touch it. I can't touch it. Doesn't work. Or if it's real, it'll give me a gold brick. No gold brick, unfortunately. And so we can still, even if this is a dream, we can still differentiate. Some of the things are able to make inferences about the future. Some are not. And the ones that can are rational to believe are real, even if we're in a dream. And then ones that can't are not rational to believe we're in a dream.
Yeah, I would say the one disqualifier was that I believed while I was awake in the dream world that I would not wake up again, and that's what happened. I woke up. That was the only thing.
That'd be a defeater. Yes.
Yeah, that would be the only thing, and it's not. It's like not even an active belief. It's sort of like a passive. It's like a. It's like an axiom of that reality is I'm not going to wake up while I'm awake. But until that happened,
some alternative explanation?
Conceived of it being a dream.
Do you have some alternative explanation of what you think might have been going on in that experience?
I think it was a dream, but I think that.
I guess I'm trying to say what is
while
what
I was
Tom's
dreaming, I had no
supposed
way
to be competing against. I don't really understand.
Well, I'm reinforcing the idea that while I'm experiencing all those things in the dream, until my reason provided me with an alternative explanation for why, like the world as I knew it had essentially ended and my life was garbage and the world was the way that it was all the same qualifiers I would use while I'm awake. And it wasn't until I woke up and applied my reasoning, go, oh, I woke up just now and I remember like the things around me. Now I have a logical reason. I can use my reasoning and say none of that was real.
Yeah, I understand that part of it. What I'm trying to say is, are we supposed to be comparing the explanation that Tom just offered to something else, right? Is there something else on the table?
No, I was just asking for information. I was laying out an example and saying, can you please help me understand this so that way I can get a little more context to come over to your side more. I think one of the things that maybe you don't
but where are you? I don't understand
when
where you're coming over from. Can
I explain?
Well,
So Drassi is worried that we're too skeptical and that we're too willing to call things hallucinations. And he's saying, look, I don't know, like, why aren't you just calling everything an hallucination? Look, this time I dreamt for 3 months. So, like, that was all hallucinations. Should I just believe that everything is? And he sort of understands that you're more skeptical than him. And now he's saying, maybe you're, like, insanely skeptical and I can't, like, that's a silly bar for other reasons.
Yeah, so I understand that point. And I think that, the clear answer to that is that we don't just assume that either everything is a hallucination or it's not, right? It's that we trust our faculties until we have some reason to, in fact, doubt them.
that's what I said.
And then in the case of, for example, if we've ingested some drug or we've had a knock on the head or whatever, and we find out about that provides us with a reason to then doubt that experience. But that doesn't mean that we doubt every experience, just the ones that the particular event is pertinent to.
That's what I said.
Or-
But if your reason for
or-
doubting it is that you had a religious experience, then that's just sort of like self-fulfilling. Like, oh, if you have a religious experience, then you had to be hallucinating because you can't have a religious experience unless you're
So-
hallucinating.
Well,
That's
I do want to jump in here. So the reason I brought this
Sorry,
up was like,
name.
even if we're in a dream, there are some things in the dream that it's rational to believe, like the things that can predict the future. And there are some things in the dream we should think are imaginary if they aren't able to predict the future. So we can say we're totally in a dream and that's fine. But if we know that there are some things in the dream that are unreliable, we shouldn't trust those things. Those are bad things to trust. We should probably think they're imaginary. Those are probably dreams of some kind. And so
But that's not how it works.
What?
My most memorable dream of all time, I stepped out of a house. I called the police because it was like a haunted house. And as soon as I stepped out, I said, you got to get in there right now. And I turned around and there was no house attached to the fucking porch. I didn't go, oh, I must be dreaming. I just felt abject horror. And that's why it's like one of the most memorable things I've ever experienced my entire life, because that shit don't happen. And I was just at a loss and I just...
Sorry,
like, fell into
what
existential
doesn't happen?
crisis.
Sorry.
You don't step out of a house and then turn around and the house doesn't exist.
Right.
But it never but the thought in my dream never occurred to me like, oh, obviously you're dreaming because this is impossible. It was that, oh my God, I have no explanation for what just happened and it's shattering my reality right now.
Okay.
And
but
do you
not in so
experience
many
that in
words.
this reality very much?
No, but what
No,
I'm saying
so
is that
in
while you're
this
experiencing
reality-
something,
In this reality, we have a lot stronger cognitive faculties than in dreams. Like if you did have your full cognitive faculties and that happened, you'd probably be like, this is a dream. I do that all the time. But
I would be able
there's
to
there's
tell that
actually
I
a
can't
trick.
fly.
If you're in a dream, if you want to recognize you're in a dream, try to push your finger through your hand and it'll go through and you'll recognize you're in a dream. It's a really cool trick. But
oh, I do the lights. You can't, lighting doesn't change in dream. So if you flip on and off a light switch, the lighting won't change.
well, they actually do in my dream. That's actually pretty cool. But
Oh,
separate
really?
topic. Yes.
I've read this. That's very interesting.
That's a future testable prediction. Good job.
It is. But
Yeah.
like in this reality, we can test things. Like if you say there's a house behind me, and when I turn around, the house will still be there, and because we're in a reality, then when you turn around and it's not there, that's a pretty good reason to doubt your reality. It's a good to feel scared at that point. You have a good reason because your faculties were not able to predict the future that there's something you should doubt. Now, in this reality, we have a lot of good reasons to doubt personal experience. We know personal experience is wrong pretty much all the time when it comes to new things that haven't been discovered yet. Miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural, UFOs, wrong. Just every time anybody has any experience about those things, it's always wrong. Whenever it's tested, 100% failure rate. So when someone says they have a personal experience of this thing, when every single time we test it, it's wrong, aren't we rational to believe that probably it's caused by this particular delusion, which we have lots and lots of evidence is a thing?
I don't think that we do that. I don't think that almost anybody ever, when they experience something that they could not have predicted, I don't think they go, oh, I must be wrong. I think they behave in a way entirely that it is real, and they're usually just scared.
Yeah, but should they? Isn't it rational? A rational person would be like, oh, this is probably a delusion. That would be the rational conclusion.
I think it's kind of hard to distinguish what is like certainly going to happen from rational. I think this is how we function. No?
I don't
Wait,
know
I mean,
what
we
Jay,
can
can I-
function better, right?
Can I ask you a
we can say-
question? Because like we talked about this before, right? This is kind of why I wanted you to go on here, right? Because
Sure.
I think that, like personally, I think that like a lot of the people you hang out with,
I don't hang
they've
out
sort
with
of
people.
You do. You absolutely do. I think that they've been giving you really bad epistemic sort of norms. And so can you give us the example of like you looking under your bed? Because I think this is like a classic example of, I would say that you're irrational the first time, right? Because you were just digging into your background beliefs, and we tend to see things in the dark that we don't like usually see. And so that's going to be a good enough reason to believe no one's down there. But you said that in that situation, it's the case that you're totally irrational the first time. So can you explain that to everyone?
So the reason why, yeah, I understand. So I got all these ideas just by thinking about them, and I could be wrong. Maybe somebody can convince me. That's fine. The reason I started down this path of thought was that I was at a house and I heard laughter from the bed below me, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird." So I went to go look, and there was nothing there. And the thought that I had was, I must have just been hearing things. And I sat back on the bed and continued to watch the movie. I heard it again, and I realized there was somebody under the bed, and I seen them laughing, like I seen their smile and stuff. It was easier to see in the dark under the bed. And I was like, oh, it was so impressive how easily I dismissed something that actually occurred, with the simple explanation of, I must have had an auditory hallucination that had no connection to any other symptoms, that does not regularly happen to me, simply because it was preferable for me to think so.
Well, I don't think preferable. I think what you mean by preferable there, you have to be careful about, right? So
Well,
you might say that given. So, are you saying, right, that given the low prior probability that you might put on there being someone under the bed, that the evidence of hearing the laughing wasn't strong enough to overcome that low prior? And push you over the edge to fully believing that there's someone on under the bed. Is that what you're saying?
What I was expressing is that it was preferable for my habits in the way in which I think and engage with the world to not actually consider my reasoning and my senses. It is to come up with a very quick and casual explanation.
Are you using preferable to just mean what you like?
I think it's like what my like subconscious process is like. This is the thing that it prefers to go to. It's simple. There's not a lot of work that has to be done. I don't have to have any pause. This is just like the path of least resistance for cognition here.
Do you mean like in terms of enjoyment, or do you mean
I mean like there is a known there is a known pattern of taking this, and therefore when it happened, it just took that route because like, well, yeah, we're just going to go path of least resistance. If I can reasonably accept this, then it's just going to give me that. It's not going to say, hey, pause for a moment, consider that there's two options here. Either you had an auditory hallucination.
I've got the point. So is it just that you're habituated to that, do you think, or is there a possibility?
Yeah. Okay. I think it was just habit, because what I should have done in that moment is go, whoa, I'm hallucinating right now. I'm having auditory hallucinations. I need to go to a doctor because I need to know if I have a brain tumor. But I didn't respond that way. I accepted the idea that I had something if I actually considered not subconsciously, but like all my actions told me that that's what I believed. But I didn't really believe it because I didn't react in a way that would entail that I believed it. And so that made me think about how I think about things.
So wait, can I try to re-describe the events as I heard them, and you can tell me if I got them wrong? So
Yes,
you're lying lying in the bed and you heard someone laughing.
Yes.
And did you go? You went to check on the bed, but you didn't see anything.
Yeah.
Okay. So now your brain has a choice. It's like, okay, either I had like this auditory hallucination where I like heard laughter, but there was no laughter, or I had like a visual hallucination where I'm not seeing anything despite it being there. And then your brain
way too
went
many
like,
steps for my my brain to go to.
Yeah, but like those are the options.
That is another reasonable explanation. Yeah.
Those are the options, like visual hallucination or like auditory hallucination. And somehow you thought, well, auditory seems more likely. You went back, heard the laughter again. You went like, wait, 2 auditory hallucination or just 1 like visual hallucination? Well, now I have to check again, and then you checked again, and you found it. Like that sounds perfectly reasonable to me.
Sure. So the point of this being is that I accepted something that I didn't actually believe immediately without thought. Because if I believed that I was hallucinating, this would be a very big deal for me, and I would have reacted differently. So there's like a conflict between what I'm accepting and what I actually believe. So it showed me that I need to have a little more pause and examine things a bit more thoroughly before I arrive at a conclusion. I need to use my reason and my perceptions a bit more in tandem instead of just relying on a very lazy instance of reasoning when it comes to how I'm
Well, it sounds
experiencing
like
my
you
sense
didn't use
data.
reasoning, right? Because it sounds like you were saying you were just habituated to do certain things, so you did them, rather than that there was any reasoning involved at all.
That's what
actually.
that's my point. I'm saying I need to apply more reasoning, and it freaked me out. So I began to consider the relationship between how I'm going to interpret things and how I'm going to apply reasoning to my interpretations of things moving forward.
How would you have wished that you act in that situation? Like,
What's
okay,
that?
so say how would you have wished that you acted?
I wished that when I looked and I saw nothing, that I would have. Well, I don't know about wished, but I think that if I truly believed that there was nothing under the bed, and I truly believed that which would mean I was hallucinating, because I know that my experience occurred, and I do know that I know it because it did. I should have.
Why do you think
left and
Oscar
went to the
asked you this
doctor.
question? What do you think? What do you think Oscar was asking you when he was asking you the question about how you might have wished you acted?
I don't know. That's why I deferred to the way that I explained.
So I
I
think
think confused by the idea of wishing it.
yeah, I think what Oscar's trying to get at, right, is reflecting back on what you did. What do you think the lesson is that you've learned, and how? So basically,
If that happens again,
how
right?
ought you act? Yeah.
Maybe the first time that I looked, I investigated further. But I think that what I really wish is that I wouldn't allow lazy reasoning to rule my interpretations of my sense perceptions, which is
Like
why
habituated reasoning or something.
What's that?
So the current story, you're like, the thing you think happened now is that you had like a small visual hallucination the first time you looked under the bed.
I don't think I had a hallucination. I just think that it was actually too dark for me to see. That like there wasn't enough light for me to get the data.
Yeah,
but
and this
that's
was
like a
what I was
small
asking
hallucination.
originally, right? Because like Jay, I was saying like it's perfectly rational to like, you don't need to immediately like bring up the justification in your head, but you can fall back to like your background beliefs that, you know, well, sometimes when I was young, I saw the coat that was hanging in my dark room and I thought that was a person, right? But then it wasn't a person. And this has happened to me like 500 times. So I know it's the case that like that sort of reasoning process works. It's fine, right?
But the
and I
problem
don't
is
get
that
why
I
you
didn't
think
actually
that's...
believe that, though. Because if I actually believed that I was having a hallucination, I am taking my ass to the doctor and making sure that I don't have something very wrong with me that might maybe kill me or disable me. If I think I'm having a hallucination, I want to get checked out. I'm telling you that right now. That if I heard somebody screaming
honestly,
in my kitchen and there was nobody there, I'm going to the doctor.
So if this
But
is
I didn't
something
behave
that
that way.
happens, yeah, and maybe you should, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that showed me that there is how easily it is to discount reasoning and accept something that you would actually believe is false. And I'm saying that that's how I ended up thinking more about these things and start to investigate what I actually thought about things.
I'm
led
having
me down
trouble.
to the path where I'm at now. That was what Max said to me, and that's what I was responding to.
Yeah, I understand. But what I'm having trouble with, I think, at this point in the conversation is just understanding how any of this like really connects to the original point. So
I was asked a question.
Well, I understand, but you weren't asked a question in a vacuum, right? The conversation took a number of steps in that direction, which is how we ended up
Max
there.
came in and asked it.
No, I know Max came in and asked this question, right? But the reason Max came in at that point and asked that question was because of things that were happening before then, where you were talking about the way that you would question your own rationality, or do you disagree?
Sure.
Jay,
I'd say if you're saying why are we talking about this, I think
just yes or no, please, just yes or no.
Did I not answer that?
Yeah, but I'm saying I like short answers, right? Please.
Okay. I
find it very frustrating when the answers are very long and
established that
rambling.
you and I find each other's forms of communication frustrating, man.
So
Wait, Jay, can I ask you a question? Maybe
so there
this
was
is what
some
makes
there was
it
something
difficult.
taking there was a bit of a conversation taking place, and anyway, that conversation was upstream of something else that we were talking about. And the point is that we were initially talking about this kind of pantheism or panentheism or something like that. And then it seemed like we were talking about things that seemed to falsify naturalism, right? And then it seemed like we got into your personal psychology, and like we've had a sort of almost like a long therapy session about your personal kind of psychology and how you reason about things and so on, right? And I don't understand how this actually fits with the initial point that I think that we should be talking about, or were talking about, which is comparing naturalism to other points of view, because I don't really want to have a very long conversation about like your personal epistemic standards.
I think I would need to have you ask this a little bit more clearly. You spoke for like 2 minutes straight, and I'm not exactly sure. What
Okay,
you're getting
well,
at
I'll
here.
do that then. How
There's
does
a
this
couple
fit
ad homs in
into
it, too.
how does this fit into the conversation about pantheism?
I'm not the one that I'm not the one that posed the question that I just answered. You should be asking Max that question.
Let me try this. So if we went to the doctors and we talked to people about their personal experience of a god, would doctors say that they had an actual experience, or would they say, oh, that's probably one of this 10,000 delusions that we have? Which one would they probably say?
They would probably say that you're having a delusion.
And is that
But,
based on
we would-
evidence?
I think that it's based on an assumption, and then applied to that assumption is then going to be applied to the evidence. Because if somebody actually did have a religious experience, the doctor is going to say the same thing.
Right, but then you'd say that if there was actually this religious things and people were having religious experiences, you'd want to do tests. You'd want to like demonstrate it in a lab of some kind, novel predictions. There are ways to show it was real. But since we
I don't
already
know if it would
know,
be,
well, if the
because I
experience
don't know
was
what that looks like.
Well,
science, is what it
TJ,
looks like.
if I could offer, you said you wrote your own. Well, you have your own thesis on morality.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, I'm not accusing you of anything. If anything, but that's one of the signs of schizophrenia. Like schizophrenics, they write
Everybody's
these.
wrong but me.
They write this like 500 long page essay on the meaning of life or something.
Sure.
And I've written a treatise of my own. It's kind of funny. But anyway, like the thing is that we'd investigate a lot further. But yeah, there is actually no difference between a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and a religious experience. Like we can't really make a distinction of it. There's no like medical boundary guidelines of when you're having which.
Yeah, there are. Schizophrenics are it's a harmful thing to have because it can impact your ability to function in society. That's why religion isn't classified as a delusion or a disease, because it isn't harmful in society. And so there are many different things. Like ADHD is considered a disorder because it's harmful in society. If it wasn't harmful, it wouldn't be a disorder. So disorders are classified by how harmful they are in society, and religious experiences aren't. And so that's why they're not considered a disorder. Schizophrenia is. That's why it's considered a disorder. But I'm not.
Yeah, if your dog is telling you to kill someone, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, even if it was
If your dog
happening,
is
it's still a
telling you to
problem.
help people.
But Drazi brought up a good point there, which was that yes, we would classify pretty much everything as a delusion because we have an overwhelmingly disproportionate amount of evidence for delusions, and we have no evidence for religious experiences being true. Now, if we had some amount of evidence of religious experiences being true, then we'd say there's two possible candidates, and we try to find some way to distinguish between the two. But right now, we have zero evidence in 2,000 years of history of religious experiences actually ever being veridical. And so there's a pretty good reason for scientists, doctors to say that was probably a delusion, because we have lots and lots of evidence of delusion and no evidence of real experiences yet. And so it seems like from the perspective of somebody who had an experience, you would
I didn't say that I did.
It wasn't specifically about you, just
Okay.
anybody. So if I had an experience, if I had a religious experience, I would look at the evidence and be like, okay, so lots of evidence of delusions, no evidence experiences are real. I would want to go beyond my experience. I wouldn't just trust it. I'd be like, okay, so I need to find some way to confirm this is real because right now all of the experiences provided have been delusional. And so the only time it would ever be rational to believe that experience is once you have applied it to some kind of extra standard and confirmed it to be real, like novel predictions. Like you could say, if I believed I had an experience of this guy named Bob, and I prayed to Bob for a gold brick and a gold brick appears, that would be phenomenal evidence. You see, test the gold brick, be like, bring it to the bank, see if they give you money for it or whatever, and then pray for another one. If another one comes, that'd be great evidence. So now you have like a really good verifiable way to trust your experience. But if your experience is of the kind that everybody else's experience is, the kinds that have always been proven wrong, it wouldn't be rational to believe the experience.
Elder. So when I see stuff, I think I compare it to like how common I think this is given my worldview. So if I see a dog, I just go like, that's probably a dog. If I see a dragon that turns into butterflies and then like explodes away, I would say probably a hallucination. I would be very surprised to hear that you wouldn't do something like that.
I feel like it's very easy to say that.
Can
but
you
if
can you
saw
say
that,
can you say if you would say?
say, I know what I saw. I think your
No, I
actual
wouldn't.
response, we don't know that. You've never experienced that. Have you ever experienced anything that you knew in the moment you were taking in with your sense perception, and you didn't have some thing that would allow you to go, I can't really trust my senses for the next
So
experience.
just
I'm gonna
pause.
adjust it something.
If we just pause there, right? Why was it that you got so angry in that response?
I wasn't like, I think you're misinterpreting how I am. I get mischaracterized a lot when I think a lot. I kind of get excited, and I'm kind of hard to read. If I'm
Okay,
angry, I'll tell you. I'm pretty emotionally honest.
Can we can do an easier question then? Like if you saw a dog and then you saw a dragon turning into about a bunch of butterflies and then exploding, and then I told you like, hey, one of those was an hallucination. Which one would you guess? Or is it just like it's totally equal? Like I saw them both, or would you?
I think
like,
if
come
you were
on.
pressing me on that, I would tell you that it's a hallucination, but I wouldn't be able to believe it. I think I'd probably spend the rest of my life trying to figure out why I witnessed what I witnessed. Well, first, I mean, obviously, I'm going to go, okay, in that case, I need to go to the doctor, because I might lean towards you. But if they say, like, clean bill of health, there's nothing wrong with you, then I'm like, okay. And I'm going to think about that for the rest of my life. And I'm going to try to find people that had similar experiences. I don't think I'd have a choice.
How are you if you just mishear a person speak? Like sometimes I mishear someone. It sounds like they're saying something, but I hear another one. Would you be the same? You're like, no, I know what I heard. Now I'm going to the doctor.
No, because
or like I'm trying to.
I'm not certain that I know what I hear, because I mishear a lot. It's super common for people to mishear. Of all the people that I know, nobody has ever reported to me. My entire experience, I've never read about anybody. I've never seen anybody. It's not like I'm just focused on me here. It's not like hyper anecdotal. Like this is not something that happens. This is not something that's reported that people say, I seen a dragon explode into a bunch of butterflies.
I got a good example for you. So in history, there's lots of cases of miracles in historical accounts. Most historians prior to like the Middle Ages and before have magic, miracles, mythical creatures, all of those in their accounts. Now, from our perspective, we normally think they're all fake. Like the consensus in history is it's all fake. They just made it up. But if we discovered like a unicorn, like a fossilized unicorn or something, we'd go back and be like, oh, that could be real. Maybe because there's actually evidence that unicorns existed. And so we could say this account, which was most likely a figment of their imagination, was actually corresponding to something in reality. But if we don't have that unicorn, no fossilized unicorn, the only rational explanation is they had a delusion. We can't like assume that there's going to be a unicorn. We should probably conclude it was a delusion because there's lots of examples of delusion that explain the data, right?
Sure, yeah, because I'd be trusting my own perceptions. I guess the thing that I'm leaning on a lot here is that the individual has to trust their reasoning and their sense perception. The individual does. They didn't have a choice. The reason why they believed there was a unicorn is because their reasoning and their experiences came to that conclusion. I don't think that you get to choose to just ignore it.
So let's say there's two people who see a dead loved one. One is a peasant from the 1300s. They see a dead loved one. Now, using all of their background knowledge, they think they're actually seeing a dead loved one. And now we show it to a professor today of neuroscience, and he sees a dead loved one. Now he knows what a bereavement delusion is. He knows this is extremely common. He's like, yeah, that's probably not my dead loved one. It's probably a bereavement delusion. The peasant would be rational, using their best knowledge, to believe there was a dead loved one. But the professor wouldn't be. The professor's like, I know there's a delusion that explains exactly this, that happens extremely commonly.
Yes.
And an actual person rising from the dead, we don't really have any evidence of that. So the professor would be rational, only rational to believe it was a delusion, right?
Yes. And then here's the thing. I really love this example, because you take these same two people and now say that a dead one actually visited both of them. They're both going to think the exact same thing in that scenario, which supports what I said, that you have to trust your reasoning of what the people.
So what would the world be like in as much detail as possible between the two cases that would be measurable, so we could find out which one of those was actually taking place?
We would have to go based on what those people said. But I'm in the
So there's a
hypothetical
difference
that I just
in the two
proposed.
worlds. Between the two worlds, there's a difference, right?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yeah, two different events
One world
happened.
is different. Right.
Yeah.
So how do we find out which of those worlds that we're in?
My point is that we don't, because both of those people have the
Well,
same
then we're
answer
asserting nothing about the world. If the world's identical in every respect, in every way between those two worlds, then there's no difference between the two.
Hang on,
Or are you saying that we couldn't find out, but like it would be possible in principle to find out?
Yeah,
like,
but it sounds
you
like
could have
Nathan's
put cameras
saying
in
that
things.
if you don't know it, then you don't know it. Then it's
So
not
how
real.
in principle?
No,
how in
no,
principle could we find out?
I don't think that just because we can't find out about something that it is like non-existent.
No. There's
how
there
in
really
principle
easy
could we
answer.
find out? How in principle could anybody find out?
That's not how hypothetical. Like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but in the hypothetical, I'm saying like this is what did happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how in principle could I think I think what you're asserting is actually contentless, because there's no actual distinction between the two worlds.
Okay. Well, I think that there's something really interesting here,
You have
and
to
I
be
was
able
going
to
to
say what the world would be like in order for that to be true, right?
I don't have to. I asserted in the hypothetical that it is true. Okay. Okay, well, I guess we're just going to go with what you're saying, because I didn't get to finish what I was saying initially before you cut me off.
Well, it's all right. I mean, I've given you plenty of time to ramble.
Yeah, I understand that you gave me plenty of time, but like, that doesn't change the fact that what I was saying and the point that I was trying to make right there didn't happen. Okay, if you could just tell me to shut the fuck up. That's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, but I'm not doing. Notice that I'm trying to calm myself down and ask decent questions and progress the conversation.
That's fine.
Okay.
All
Let's.
I'm saying is that you're trying to pin me down to something that like yeah, but I didn't say that. Like you're ignoring the hypothetical. You're trying to grill me on a hypothetical that I didn't make. You say it was constantly. Okay, that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to say like, well, here's this.
No, I'm trying to apply verificationist standards to the claims that you're making, right? Because I think the claims that you're making are meaningless.
Well, I'm not making a claim. I'm asking a hypothetical about.
Well, you are making
in relation to his hypothetical, and then
I think you're making a claim. Do you want to know what claim I think that you're making?
Sure.
That there's a meaningful distinction, right, in the world when there's no way of finding something out.
No, I think that we're essentially saying the same thing then.
Well, let me clarify. So let's say that you're the doctor. You know about bereavement delusions. You see a dead loved one.
Yeah.
Would you ever be rational to believe that you actually saw a dead loved one?
No, which asserts my point that you have to use your sensory perceptions and your reasoning to determine what happened. And that if you decided against it, if the doctor said, like, this goes against everything I know that I spoke to my dead loved one yesterday. It wasn't a bereavement hallucination or delusion. This actually happened. You go, well, you're fucking crazy. This goes against your reasoning. Like, you would have to dismiss all of your reasoning. How could you possibly do it? And he can't. That's why he never would, which is my initial
so
claim.
We need something more. We would need something more than the experience, because the experience can be fully explained by the delusion. So the experience isn't evidence that it's real.
Well,
you
correct.
need something more.
Right. You need the experience and to apply it to your reasoning, which has been my claim this entire time that has been being tested.
Well, right, so
every time it seems like the thing that we
reasoning
come back to is that.
Well, experience and reasoning can never be evidence you saw a dead loved one. You need something more than both of those. So you would need like novel prediction. So for example, you could say, if I saw my dead loved one, like my grandma's in my basement, I should be able to bring you there and you can talk to my grandma. And she can tell you things about me that I haven't told you. And be like, oh yeah, my grandma told me that you like chocolate chip cookies, or that your middle name was Eugene or something. That would be good. That would be more than just personal experience, right?
Yeah, but you have to add on extra things that weren't included. I said he saw and talked to them, but what if there was no novel predictions made in that?
Then
So
you-
what I'm
then-
trying to get to,
yes. Then you'd only be rational to believe it was a delusion. The rational position, if you know what delusions are and you know how human brains work, it's
Right.
only rational to believe it's a delusion. Now, you may be ignorant of those things, but if I didn't tell you,
But there's a
here's
way
a
of finding
delusion,
out.
yeah,
sure. Okay, maybe the part that I'm missing when I say and use your reasoning. When I say use your reasoning, it includes the experiences and knowledge that you have that makes up your reasoning. So you have your reasoning, and you're going to the way that you apply it is by applying knowledge that you already have, experiences that you already have against this. So that's why the doctor, even if it was an actual experience, he would be insane to think that it wasn't a delusion.
Well, so now that we've told you about all the delusions, why should you, or why should, suppose we could tell everyone on the planet about these delusions? Would any of them be rational to believe they actually had a religious experience?
Assuming that they believed that and were convinced, I would say, yeah, they'd be irrational.
And don't we have enough evidence for delusions that you should be convinced that those are real?
Well, you say we, that just means that humanity has it. All I'm saying is that I don't think that I don't think that Nathan disagrees with me, and I don't think T-Jump disagrees with me. Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to press this point, is that I think that you both still agree with me, because both of you words, what you're saying is but look, this person knows this, so they would have to think this. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm going a little bit further than that. So I'm saying that we all know about the delusions, and we can scientifically verify them. These are things that we can confirm. Delusions are real. We can't verify the religious experience. There's no reason to believe it is actually the case. Your personal experience isn't a reason to believe it's actually the case, even if you are, I would say, dumb and ignorant of the science. And because you're ignorant, you choose to believe it. I'd say that's irrational, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah. I would say that you would need to have experienced something that the data couldn't account for, like an entirely new sense perception, or an entirely new kind of experience that's outside of anything that's kind of something that you would expect from God if they're talking to you. It would have to be something wholly unexplainable. You wouldn't even be able to put it into words. It would have to be something that could.
But then what's believed, I suppose, in that case, right? So then the question,
I don't
because
know.
this is
what I'm saying is agreeing with you still.
Well,
I don't think I'm disagreeing. I don't think we've been disagreeing this entire time. It's just maybe
I'm
it's
not
just the way
We're
I'm saying it.
about the dog dragon thing for sure.
Well, yeah, but the person, so like I said, the person goes to the doctor, and if they dismiss anything that would signify that you had a hallucination, then you would have to believe that it was real.
Well, it seems to me in some cases people should believe that on your view, right? It seems to me on your view, people should believe certain things that they don't have reasons to believe, right? And I think that that's where the disagreement is.
No, I'm not saying. No, I'm not saying they should ever believe something you don't have a reason to believe. I'm saying that maybe when I say reasoning, maybe we don't agree on what that means.
Yeah.
Because every time that somebody else explains to me their perspective, I feel like I agree with you 100%. In fact, I think I've been the most saying I agree with you person here. I just
maybe let's just slow down. And I think if we can slow down and you can try to be very clear about what it is that you're saying, that will help me to understand if there is a disagreement, right?
Sure.
So are you saying that some people have certain experiences, and those experiences justify a belief in some kind of supernatural thing?
This would be very theoretical, but yeah, if there was some sort of experience that you and I could never put into words because it is so out of the bounds of our normal conscious experience, then that would be the only way that I could say, if we had all the information that was discussed today, that they could possibly make that claim.
And do you think that that
like some crazy thing like I experienced the glory of God, it's beyond words, you know what I mean? It was like some kind of experience that like doesn't even make sense to have in like a physical body or something like that.
And do you think that belief that had been formed is rationally defeasible in principle? Could someone find something out that they would abandon that belief later on?
I don't know, because this is a very hypothetical experience. So like,
let me tell you a story, and you can tell me if you think this makes sense, right?
Okay.
So someone becomes a Christian, and they believe that they've had this experience of God when they were singing hymns. Later on, they deconvert from their religion, and they come to learn about neuroscience, and they learn about the various expectation and memory distortion biases and so on that went into that experience that they tell themselves that they had of God. And they come to believe that in fact they didn't experience God, but instead this is a normal thing that humans' brains do, and that sufficiently explains the experience that they had, and that the experience was false. Is that a scenario that sort of makes sense to you?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because they're applying their reason to the experience still, just post hoc.
Yeah, I agree. So it seems like when we apply reason, right, what that means is that the reason can actually push us either way on any of these beliefs as we accumulate more reasons, as we find out more things.
Absolutely.
Right.
So is that correct that we don't disagree?
Well, if that's all we believe, then yeah, I don't think that we disagree.
Okay, I think that's where a lot of my frustration has been coming from. So that I'm trying to tell you, and at points TJump, that like we don't even disagree with each other, and it seems like everybody's getting really frustrated with me. And like,
well, I'm not sure you had this insight, right? I think you've been quite unclear in the way that you've communicated.
I did say that I think it's a communication thing throughout this conversation. I think maybe we're just misunderstanding, because I think that I agree with you.
So I've liked you throughout this experience. I don't really get why Nathan has been this frustrated with you, if I'm honest.
I understand.
But I wasn't here at the start either.
Sometimes.
I think one thing we might still disagree on is like the role of background information. Like for me, that's quite important. Like if I have like 28 years of experience of a thing working a certain way, just like having it work the other way, like the first time I'm gonna be like, yeah, maybe I messed something up here, or maybe something went wrong, and then if it keeps happening, like eventually I will, okay, maybe this thing can happen both ways. But you seem to be like very like, if suddenly a person seems to teleport for you, you're like, whoa, that's I mean, people can teleport now.
So I guess the best explanation for that would be, I think I seen I didn't recognize immediately. I seen a video that TJump did that kind of touched on this idea that there might be a completely separate explanation that perfectly maps onto all of our predictions, but like the thing causing, like the mechanism by which the thing operates on is something totally different. We're wrong about how we understand it. And that it could be that the thing that you witnessed was the one of the things that does differentiate it from how we think things work. But in all these other instances, it operates perfectly fine. That would be like the only way that I would say that what you're saying, like we could branch off from that.
I mean, I agree that it just could be wrong, right? But like the very first time it happens, I'm probably gonna like assume that I did something wrong, and like if it keeps happening, then I'm gonna be like, okay, this is the way. But I think the first time I should
sensory perceptions in the relationship.
Yeah, but the first time I would trust my background information, right?
Is that not is that not how reasoning works?
Because like in the bed example that you did, I would probably do as you did. I was like, hear the laugh, check on the bed, nothing there. I would be like, okay, something went wrong. Hear the laugh again. I was like, okay, I'm less likely to hear the laugh 2 times. So I think you just did the correct thing in that scenario, but you seem troubled by it.
Oh, you know what? I think when you say that, I actually think I can empathize with Nathan a lot more now when he said, what's the purpose of that story? And I must not have made something perfectly clear when I told that. So,
well, I understood your answer when you said that this is a response to what the thing that Max has said to me, right? But I do think that was a little bit obtuse, because it was clear that the reason Max joined and asked that question was because of the conversation that was taking place prior to that, right? And it seems that this was all kind of downstream of our talking about whether or not naturalism is true and the mind being a universe, and how it is that we can actually compare naturalism to alternative candidate theories, right? And I was under the assumption that all of this conversation was nested within that, and I was trying to get us to kind of track our way back there and talk about how what we were talking about in terms of this stuff to do with epistemology was related to those questions. So that was why I was
very
asking
overwhelmed
those questions.
by I'm not usually in a scenario where there's this many people asking me this many questions on the fly. I'm not sure if I said it or not. I'm still recovering from surgery. This was very on the fly for me. I wasn't like mentally prepped for this at all. In fact, I was in the middle of making a video for something totally unrelated, and I just sort of hopped in here on the fly. So like I think I was just very overwhelmed, and I didn't. I just don't think that I had the capability in that moment to understand that's what you were going for.
It's a tough situation.
Sorry, I'm not trying to. I wasn't even trying to derail. Honestly, I came in here. I was gonna try to talk about deontology, and then somebody asked me if I believed in God. I was like, this is such a complicated question for me. Like, here's my thought processes. When I put the $900,000 on God, like I'm guessing. I'm not certain. Like, but like if I'm gonna bet, I'm gonna bet heavy. That that's what I'm guessing. And I understand it's a guess.
Yeah, I mean 90 is not that much.
I still have 100,000. I still have to keep 10%. I'm still holding on to something, but I know I'm guessing.
Cool. Well, appreciate you coming on. It was a good conversation, I think. And I hope you get better from surgery.
Thanks. It hurts a lot. They're very misleading about how it goes.
Which surgery?
I got a vasectomy 2 days ago. And after the video I'm working on now, I'm going to make a video just so that people who are interested in it, they can be a little more prepared, because the doctors misled me. Everybody I talked to about it misled me. Everybody says it's not a big deal. Like I went to work like the next day, like everybody's full of shit. It hurts. You're awake.
Yeah, they cut the whole thing off. It's insane.
They cut the whole thing off. The doctors lied.
I'm not saying I'm on painkillers and I'm like out of my mind or anything. I just am enduring a great deal of pain and exhaustion. Nathan, I'm gonna get the hell out of here so that you can have like a normal, coherent conversation. I appreciate you entertaining me. Nathan, if you ever want to talk a little more thoroughly and help me understand what you're thinking, I'm not usually so difficult to communicate with. It's been a hell of a couple of days. I appreciate you explaining why you got frustrated and all that. That actually means a great deal. That changes my opinion of you a lot, and how I think about you is your willingness to explain your frustrations and all that, not just being mad and letting me wonder why. So that's nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, have a good day.
Cheers.
You guys want to talk about moral realism?
Yeah, go on.
Cool. Wait, is anyone other than T-Jump here a moral realist?
Yeah,
I think I lean towards intuitionism. So
I think I'm a quietist. So yeah,
All right. Something that like I've been thinking is does it actually make sense to say that something is just like good? Like I think that it makes sense to say something.
Pizza's good. Is pizza good, Alejandro?
Well, that goes into what I was
Yes
saying.
or no? Pizza good?
Problem
solved.
The standard that you have.
Depending on the theory, what are you, a weirdo? It's pizza
If
good.
he says
yes or
no, we have to ban him. You have to be banned.
Right. It depends on the pizza also. But no, it depends on what your standard of goodness is. But like, there's always like.
Okay, how about the Holocaust, Alejandro? Is that good?
Well, it depends on what your standard of goodness is.
Well, just to clarify, I think his question is like, if you ask, is there tallness? Like to say, is there tallness doesn't make sense. There's no essence of tallness. You can say there's a particular thing and it is tall, but you can't say is there tallness. And I think he's saying
that's
goodness.
Almost it, but not exactly.
I think that's.
Can I guess?
Sure.
Like, it doesn't make sense to say like, is an elephant objectively big? You're like, well, it's bigger than some things and it's smaller than some things. Like, what does it mean? Yeah. Yes.
Wait. That's almost. That's really.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's going to be good, but dependent on someone's goals, right, and what they want to.
Yeah, pretty much.
Congratulations,
yeah,
Nathan.
Is there a way
But that's
to
the
think
same as
about-
what you said, I think.
Okay.
Relative to something, right? Relative to someone's goals.
Yeah. Like T-Jump and Display Name had a like it's the same ballpark of thinking, but like when I think about good, I think about just like if it's advantageous for a goal, and I think that like when we say that stuff is like good or bad, that's just shorthand, and there's like a standard implied in the context, but but like there's always a standard if you're being coherent. Like there's always a goal that you're trying to reach, and then a thing is good for that goal. And that goal is generally like human well-being when we talk about like whether the Holocaust or pizza is good. But like, is there another way to think of good where you can actually say that something is objectively good and there is like a good out there?
Sure, there could be a law of physics that is goodness. Why
Yeah,
not?
that.
Well, you just almost said a sentence that was like that, right, Alejandro? You almost said it's objectively good that. That's how you say a sentence like that. You just say it.
Yeah, it's really easy.
Sure, yeah. But like actually, because like I think that when people say like stuff is like objectively good, they just like picked up the shorthand and like are taking the shorthand seriously. But it's always shorthand for like good for something.
Well, I would say
It's
that
almost like they learned English from their parents and people around them.
does it make sense to say something is gravity?
Yes.
Because there's a thing in
don't
reality,
know.
and gravity
Yeah.
is that thing, right?
Yes.
So could there be a thing in reality that is morality? That is goodness is like good and bad, or like things of morality is the moral is the word we're looking toward. So could there be a thing in reality that is morality, and good and bad are just talking about that thing, just like gravity pulls things towards you? That's just what it's talking about.
Thing though?
I have no idea, but could it be the case?
I don't like understand how like would it be like an
It could be a law of physics. It could be a platonic object.
so
It could
would
be.
a
Wait,
law of physics that,
So
like,
how about this, Alejandro? So imagine, so we all just had this conversation, right? I said, "Is pizza good?" And Tom said, "Yeah, it's great. I love it." But unfortunately, I left it in the oven a bit too long because you were talking to that guy. But so there we've got some moral discourse, right? Apparently, Tom says his pizza's good. Okay. Now, does this make sense to you? What makes it true that Tom's pizza is good is that there's a good particle in there. And so when Tom says the proposition, "This pizza is good," the good particle just poofs into his pizza at the time he says it, right? That makes it good.
No, it
and
was
that is what
always
makes
there.
it true. And that makes it true. Is that a possibility in your mind?
that would.
And that's what we'd be referring to when we say that it's good.
I'm trying to think of like.
I don't think this is true, by the way, obviously.
Possible,
Nathan
but-
100% believes this. We're going to clip
Yeah.
this. And like,
Okay. I don't see like any like thing that would bar this from existing, but like I think that like that seems really weird.
Yeah, I agree with that, right? But I
Yeah.
think that's all Tom's asking when he's asking, "Is it possible?"
Yeah.
I mean, I think that
but maybe.
there's something weird going on with the labeling, because we're like, this law of physics is morality, and I'm like, are you saying that it is actually labeled in English morality? Like there's a law of physics and it
Well, this
has a
isn't
tag
how
that says
well,
morality?
this isn't how I think about, this isn't
Yeah.
how I sort of think about gravity or goodness, right? Because I think that they're words with conditions of use. So I don't think
Yeah,
of,
same
like,
here. Yeah.
I don't think of things that we use as predicates in our language, or things that we can refer to as nouns, like perhaps goodness or whatever. I don't think of words as having referential power and pointing to these things in the way that I think about these things. But I accept that like something different could be a possibility, right? Like that there's a particle that we are actually referring to, and that's the property that things have when we say that they're good. It's possible, at least.
so I think the best way to approach it is like epistemic. We think morality is a thing because we see like somebody punching a baby, and we get this feeling that that's bad, and we say, well, we're going to call that immoral. And if it's the case that there is, every time we see that, it's because there's some particle that's generated when somebody punches a baby, then morality is that phenomenon in nature. In nature, there's this good particle that's generated, and our feeling is just us sensing that particle. And so if that's the case, then morality is this thing in physics that's generating this particle. And so when we say something is good or bad or moral or immoral, those are feelings that we have. And if those feelings are caused by some objective thing independent of our opinions, then it would be objective morality. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, you don't believe in shoulds, right?
Wait, I just want to respond to a thing that T-Jump said. Like that would be like a sense of moral intuition, but that wouldn't be like a thing.
Well, how about we establish that maybe this will help Alejandro, right? Suppose that there's these things called atoms, and every time that they arrange themselves into a pizza, we say there's a pizza. Now, is it true that there's objectively a pizza there in that case?
Yes.
Okay. So now imagine that there's this new particle called the good particle, and that's there for every true sentence we assert where something, when we say something is good. In that case, is it objectively the case that something would be good in that kind of hypothetical?
Yeah, but I'm not sure how that would be like a moral thing. Like we could call that thing, good, but I don't.
Well,
see
it would be by stipulation in the thought experiment.
Yeah, we could
so it
label
might not be a very good theory, right? You might say, well, that's really weird, and I don't think that that's what's going on. But just stipulating it in the theory that there is some particle, and that's what makes it true in all of these cases that it's good. Would
Yeah,
be.
can I ask some more questions about like what this would exactly entail, like how this would work with a particle?
Sure.
So like would the particle be like, would it be able to give commands to tell you what you ought to do, or
we
would
can
it make you feel things and then like you would feel uncomfortable about?
Yeah, it
like,
would probably motivate you, right?
Well, it
Like,
could be either
that's-
one. They could be magical leprechaun particles that literally tell you to do stuff. It doesn't make a difference. Like, what does it have to do with the question?
We can give them mass
don't
such
understand
that
what
they
to
can
do.
weigh in favor. That would be cool.
Yeah, that's the good one.
I didn't catch the first half of that. Sorry.
He says we can give them mass so that they would weigh in favor.
So just like
It's a
atoms
dad pun.
weigh
It's
in
a dad
mass,
pun.
yeah, good particles weigh in favor of order.
Right. I feel like this would be a thing that would be different from every other type of particle that I
Yeah,
understand.
it would. It definitely would. Right.
Yeah.
This is the point. Right. Not.
Right.
I don't think any of us actually believe that this is the case or anything like that. I think what we're just highlighting is that this is a very basic, like, realist way that you can think about it, and then maybe once you accept this as a possibility, maybe then you can build off of that to understand different kind of related models.
But isn't like one claim of the moral realists would be that you would be like irrational if you didn't like prefer the good or something? It feels like it's stipulated by moral realism.
I think it depends on your
Yeah.
reasons as well.
Well, there's some versions of moral realism that say that the moral thing to do is something that is logically irrefutable or some case, and so you'd be illogical if you rejected it.
Yeah,
or
like
something. But
irrational,
those are really extreme views. But your original question is how can there be an objective morality? Because it doesn't seem to make sense. To use a simpler example, how could there be an objective unicorn? Like we don't think unicorns exist. We think they're subjective. They're a thing in the human imagination. But what would it mean for unicorns to exist objectively? Well, if they were just an object, a thing that existed in the universe, independent of imagination, it would be objective, right?
Yeah.
So if morality was a thing in the universe that existed independent of imagination, it would be objective, right?
If that were the case, and if yeah, sure.
So it could be made of particles. It could be made of a law. It could be made of a god. It could be made of a platonic object. It doesn't matter what it's made of. If it is a thing that exists in the universe somewhere, it's objective.
But okay, so let's say that Alejandro asks me, Oscar, is there objective reality? And then I just like label my headphones morality, and I'm like, yes. Look, Alejandro is going to be like, but that's not the question I asked. Like,
well, hang on. I think this is a different
yeah.
point, though. I think this is a different point. So you could say, so in that case, you've both signed up to you both agree on what it is for something to be objective, right? It's for something to be objective, just in case there's either a property or a substance or thing in the world to which your words are referring that makes the sentence that you're uttering true, right? So you both agree about that, but what you disagree about is whether or not the correct type of thing that makes the good discourse true is your headphones, right? So that's what the disagreement is about. And I think
that's the next question is so we understand that objectivity is something that exists in reality independent of imagination. And then Display Name's response is that what we mean by the word moral. What is it that we mean by the word moral? Now, I think morality refers to sensation, an emotion we get when we see people punching babies. That's what it refers to. Whatever is causing that is the essence of morality. And so it's good to know, like, it's not just a hand, right? You can't just label your hand morality. You have to label the particular experiences that we get.
The thing that causes the emotion.
Right. And so whatever is causing that, that's going to be morality. And so if whatever is causing that is an objective thing that exists in reality, then morality would be objective.
So wait, I think brains cause that, and I do believe brains exist, but I'm not a moral realist.
Right. I mean, like a law of physics, a literally like independent.
Oh, it has to be like the same for each person or something?
Yeah, I think it would be something like that. Well, Tom can speak for his own theory, but I think that's what he's getting at here.
Yeah, so it's not just the brain, it's not just a product of evolution, it's literally a fundamental part of reality, like a law of physics. Then it would be objective. If it's just a brain
But
or a
if it-
product of evolution, then it would be subjective.
That we're
Yeah,
truly
but if-
referring to in each case, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it'd be, yeah.
If there was like a thing, one thing, and it just sent out like totally different signals to me and Nathan, such that we totally disagree on morality. Like everyone just disagrees. Everyone just has their subjective take.
Yeah.
But there's actually
I think that would
one
falsify
single thing.
Tom's theory, right? Because that's like saying, is it objectively true that there's a pizza made of atoms, right? So and that's like saying, so suppose I produced you a pizza that wasn't made of atoms. Well, would that falsify your theory? I think it would, if that's the direction you're going in, right? Maybe I preempted.
Well, we'd have no evidence at that point. So if there was a thing that causes completely randomized intuitions for literally everyone and there's literally no pattern, then we'd have no evidence for this thing. It would still be true. There would still be an objective morality. We just have no reason to believe it. So if there is this thing and if it causes a consistent pattern that we can see, then we would have reason to believe it's there. If it causes a randomized pattern, we would not have reason to believe it's there. We wouldn't be able to.
So let's say it's fairly random, but there are some like patterns in it.
Then there would be some patterns and we would have some evidence. It'd be very little, but it would be some.
Yeah, so there would be objective morality, but everyone would disagree. But there would be like a thing that made all the disagreements
what people
true,
disagree
and there
with-
would be some evidence for it.
What people agree or disagree on doesn't matter. Like there are people who think the world is flat. Like whether we disagree just doesn't matter. What makes it objective is there such a thing that exists? And then there's a question.
Yeah, and it would. Yeah, and there would be. Yeah.
And if that thing affects us is the second question. And if it does affect us, does it create a consistent pattern in that, and can we see it? Those are all separate questions. Alejandro's question was just in general, what would it mean for morality to be objective? And it would mean that these particular sensations that we have, which we use the word morality to refer to, would be caused by something that actually exists in reality, independent of our subjective experience or evolution.
So what I think it would mean for morality to be objective is to like the discourse that we have when we say like, oh, that's immoral, that's not immoral, that those sentences, it doesn't matter who says them, like they're either true or they're false. So it can't be like.
I think that's the same as what Tom's saying. Actually, though, I don't know that. So let's maybe you can say if this isn't right. Okay. So Tom seems to be saying there's something going on in people's brain states, right? And there are some particular brain states that are what it is to be good. Okay. So when people are saying things like that's good or that's bad, it either is or isn't the case that they're in that brain state. So there is some fact of the matter there, I think, on Tom's theory, and there, you know, and so I think that meets the kind of question that you're raising there, Oscar.
So
I also want to clarify what you said when you said true. Like if by true you mean it corresponds to reality, then yeah.
I don't know what truth theory I prefer. So my worry is if there's a thing that there is a force, and it gives us almost the same intuitions, but the force is such that it gives Nathan the sensation that murder is good, and it gives me the sensation that murder is bad. Like otherwise, it's really like really good. Like everyone has the same intuitions, and then Nathan says murder is good, and then I say murder is bad. Then we would both be correct, right? We would both be referring to the.
I know one of us would be wrong. I think.
No. If he's saying that.
Same.
If he's saying that the law
because we're
itself,
getting different things.
I think he's saying that the law itself exists and the law is giving you a different message than it's giving him. And since they are both from the law, then you would both be correct. If that was the case,
we'd be wrong because it's not the fact that you get it from the law that makes a person's belief correct. It's what the actual state is in reality, right? So one of us has a false belief about the relationship between the mental state of good or badness that we have and the actual state that obtains in.
That would be more accurate of my position, because I think that it would just be our interpretation would be wrong. But I think he's specifically asking, like, imagine there's a God. He tells you not to kill people. He tells him to kill people. In that situation, are you both right? And yes, if there is an objective morality, and that thing tells two people to do two different things.
But that's a contradictory state of affairs, I think, on your view. Because on your view, there's this particular brain state that makes it that makes it true, right? That something is good.
Well, no, for mine,
And
the
then
truth doesn't. The brain state is just an interpretation. Like when
Yeah,
I
it's
see a
it's the
TV,
signal that makes it true.
Yeah, so the brain state for me is irrelevant. It's just how we
Okay.
see the morality.
Or there's this thing. I mean, we can call it whatever, like call it Q or a particle or whatever, right? There's this
Yep.
thing that makes it true in
Yep.
the world.
Yep.
And I think that what Oscar's trying to stipulate is an example where you have the same states of affairs, right? But in one case it's true, and in another case it isn't true. But given the theory, right, that's an impossible state of affairs because that's just a contradictory state of affairs. Where
No, so it'd be like if you saving a person generates goodness particles, but him killing a person generates goodness particles. Both of those generate goodness particles. So both of those would be good actions, even though it seems contradictory to us because it's one is killing, one is not killing. And so it would be possible for it to generate goodness particles for you to kill somebody, but to generate goodness particles for him to not kill somebody. That would definitely be possible. I don't think that is how it works, but it is possible.
Yeah. So I mean, those are two different actions. Like my body killing something, Nathan's body killing something.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more like Nathan and me. We both witness a murder, and I get badness signals in my head. Like it sends badness to me, and it sends goodness to Nathan. And then I say,
so
okay,
like if it
because
generates
then I would
goodness
say
particles
that's
in your
bad.
brain, yeah. So if like it generates goodness particles in your brain but not his brain, it'd be the same as if they happened when you murdered them. So yes, it can generate goodness particles in one brain but not another brain. Sure.
So then we should just change our language to like, it's bad in my head, and Nathan should say it's good in my head, and
sure,
those would be
if that's
objective
how
truths.
morality worked, where it just subjectively chose which brain it was going to generate goodness particles in, then in order to make an accurate model of objective morality, we'd have to say goodness is the kind of thing where the goodness generates the goodness particles in our brain or something.
I guess to me then that seems indistinguishable from a subjective account, because it doesn't seem to me like then that on that account that there is some fact of the matter that's true or false.
Well, no, that'd still be objective because it still has goodness particles being generated. It's just the condition under which those goodness particles are generated isn't correspondent to our emotions anymore, or if it's only correspondent to whatever we subjectively feel is good. And so in that case, the kind of goodness this would not correspond to the way we use the words, because it's very silly. But there would still be an objective goodness. It'd just be weird.
Wait, T-Jump, I have a question. Are you saying that the goodness particles produce reasons to act against your desires to not put a... Okay, then what are they specifically doing? They're just compelling you, they're motivating you.
No, they just generate a feeling. They just generate a feeling. That's it.
They generate a feeling.
Yeah.
Well, then I don't know. Yeah, then I don't. That doesn't really seem like moral realism to me. But we may just be using different definitions.
This is just an example of what it would mean for morality to be objective. The only thing it requires is morality has to correspond to something in the world that causes these feelings. That's all it means. I don't actually believe in the moral particle. That's not the point of this argument. So the only point here is that could morality be objective with a moral particle? Yes. And then Display Name asked, well, what if the moral particle generates under some random conditions in different brains or something? Then okay, you could have that. It's still logically possible. It would still be objective. It would just not correspond to the way we use the words. It would just be like morality would be whatever you feel or something, but it would still be objective.
I guess I thought what was being asked by Oscar was a case where
Oscar is Display Name, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Oscar is display. Oscar is display name. So I thought what was being asked by Oscar was a case in which there's one particular event that's happening, right? Like a murder or something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Oscar was saying there are two people who witness this murder. One person has goodness particles in their brain and says it's good, but the other person doesn't have goodness particles in their brain. And
I thought he was saying
good.
The other person says it's not good, but is also getting goodness particles.
Maybe you can clarify, Oscar.
Well, they'd be getting goodness particles, right?
Because I thought Oscar was saying if there is this law of goodness and it's telling you that this action is good, but it's telling him that killing is good, the opposite is good. Oh no, I think he's saying...
Yeah, because then that's, I think, someone's got a faulty epistemology, right? Or they're cognitively deficient or something.
Well, that's why he's not saying they're epistemic. He's saying that their brains are working perfectly, and this law itself is just telling one person one thing and a different person a different thing. Is that correct, Oscar?
Right. But that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. The law seems to be operating then, but that seems to be about the person's cognitive faculties, where they're not recognizing the presence of the particle, right? Whereas in order in order for the law to be functioning in a faulty way, it seems that it would have to be the case that the particles would be present in one person's brain and not the other person's, when both had experienced an event that was either good or bad.
Yeah.
So are we just confusing like objective morality with like moral realism? Because I thought T-Jump would say like,
Those
That
are
was
the
the
same
same
thing.
oh,
thing.
I think they're different things. So I think this would be a case of like moral realism, but the moral realism is subjective because it's given like different people different answers. So statements are dependent on the person saying it, which is the
So
definition of
morality is
subjective.
real but subjective, as opposed to
No.
morality is
That would so objective means true, independent, stance independent truth values. So if morality is true when there is goodness particles, that's something that's true independent of opinion. So it's objective. Even if it's the case that whatever you subjectively feel generates goodness particles, it would still be objective that this morality existed, because the morality is contingent on the goodness particles. So even if your subjective opinion determines what generates goodness particles, it would still be an objective morality. So subjective morality means that there is no stance independent truth claim there, which means it's just true because you think about it and no other reason. If you think about it, therefore it generates goodness particles, and whatever generates goodness particles is objective morality. That would still be objective, even if your brain generates goodness particles whenever you feel good.
So I think we're just using language a bit differently. I think when I say objective morality, what I mean is like statements of the form X is wrong, X is right, X is good. Those are not dependent on what person is saying the sentence. So like it doesn't. If you heard that sentence, you don't have to say, "Oh wait, to know if this is true, I need to know who said it."
Right.
That's what I think is standardly meant by objective morality. And moral realism is like, do these properties really exist? That's not how you use the language.
So imagine a unicorn right now. Is that objective or subjective?
I don't use language that way, right? The unicorn doesn't exist.
The fact
so the unicorn doesn't exist.
Is the unicorn you're imagining objective? Is that the question? Is the unicorn you're imagining objective?
I think he's saying, is the unicorn objective?
Well, the reason
That's
I ask
not
this is
it.
because it's both. Objective and subjective are extremely vague in philosophy. There's dozens of different definitions. They're not technical terms. If you are imagining a unicorn, subjectively, it's your subjective experience that's having the experience of the unicorn, but it's an objective fact in reality that you are imagining a unicorn. So it's both objective and subjective. And so philosophy, you don't normally use objective and subjective in like, they're not strict usages, but objective would normally mean realism. Because it means it's something that stands independently true. It stands independently true that you are currently imagining a unicorn, so it's objective.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Make it sentences. I was confused when you say, is the unicorn objective? Because I was thinking that you should say like, is this sentence objectively true or subjectively true? But you were saying like, is the thing objectively true?
And I think that what's going on here is so first I'd say I'd agree that I don't think that there's any particularly standard use between objective and subjective in philosophy, and philosophers have lots of different standards and ideas around what exactly that means. I do think that there is a distinction though that philosophers make, which would help to kind of clarify what was being asked in that case, and that would be between intentional with an S, not intentional like the thing that people in philosophy of mind always talk about, intentional contexts and ordinary contexts, right? So I think if you're asking the question, is it true that there's a unicorn of the world, right? Versus, is it true that you believe there's a unicorn or something? Then you're asking two different questions. One of them is about the intentional context of your beliefs, and the other one is about the world independently of anyone. And I think that's what when people talk about objective, they tend to be referring to the first of those cases. And I think when people talk about subjectivity, they tend to be referring to those intentional contexts. Right?
Yeah. So the sentence like, Oscar was imagining a unicorn or is imagining a unicorn.
Yeah. Oscar believes that. Typically it's after like a that. Is it? Yeah. Like, so if I asked you the question, is it true that, right, there's a unicorn? But it wouldn't be true but the sentence "there's a unicorn" wouldn't be true, right? What would be true is Oscar believes that there's a unicorn would be what's true.
And the same thing would apply to morality. So if we're talking about moral realism, we want to say, is it true that there is a morality that exists? Not, is it true that you imagine it to exist?
I think the reason I get confused is, let's say that if I just subjectively think that something is good, then that's gonna send a signal to this thing, and then it's gonna send me goodness particles. And if I just think that something is bad, totally subjectively, it's gonna send a signal, and then it's gonna send badness back to me. That sounds like
I didn't think that was Tom's theory, right? Is it?
No. This is a new theory.
Okay.
That would be a subjectivist theory of morality, but it would
still be
also be a
objective.
realist theory.
No, it would still be objective.
You're just saying I use the words this way. I'm saying this is the way I use words. If you want to, I'm just explaining how I use words.
Maybe here's a reason why what Oscar's describing wouldn't be an objective theory, right? Because all of the states of affairs about some event that two people would be talking about would be kept the same, right? Like the murder of a child or whatever.
But not the goodness particles, because the goodness particles are the determining factor.
Right. But then the question is, so what's the fact of the matter about the murder? Because we can only appeal to the goodness particles, right? But one person has goodness particles and the other person doesn't have goodness particles. Who's right in that case? What can we appeal to in order to figure out what the truth is?
Well, in that case, the murder itself wouldn't be moral or immoral, but the goodness particles in the brain would be. So this is where it gets weird, because at that point, morality has nothing to do with the murder. It's only about wherever the particles erupt, and that's it. And so in this case, the murder wouldn't be moral or immoral because the murder didn't generate any particles. It's just it happens to generate particles in this brain. And so in this brain...
But then wouldn't that be, on this theory, right? This would kind of...
So it would make it a very stupid moral law. Like, it's very stupid.
It seems like what this does is it then... it kind of nukes that theory's capacity to actually explain any of our moral discourse.
Yes.
Because that's going to be true in any case where what we're supposed to be describing, right, is whether like hitting a kid, stomping on a puppy, whatever example you want to give, is a good or bad thing for someone to do. But we can never actually figure that out in any particular case, because the only moral facts in that world are features of people's brains, right, which have nothing to do with what's actually taking place then in the world, which we think we're trying to explain with our meta-ethical theory.
Yes, exactly. That's why I said before that it just doesn't correspond to what we mean by morality. I would agree. We would no longer be able to determine what morality was at that point, but it'd still be objective. It'd still be real, because it's caused by whatever the rule is.
But it wouldn't be objectively true that that was like right or wrong for someone to have been murdered, right?
Right.
And so then it seems like there's no objective fact of the matter. It seems like this is a theory of no fact of the matter, right? Rather than it being a theory which makes it true that like murder is right or murder is wrong.
Well, there'd still be a fact of the matter. The fact of the matter would be the goodness particle is released here or something, and that would just
that's an answer to a different question. The question in that case, the question that's an answer to is, was a goodness particle released in someone's brain? But the question that I want answered in a world where moral realism is true is it true that the murder was right or wrong?
Well, I think that's a subsidiary question. So the first question is moral realism true? Is there something in reality which determines what is or isn't moral? And if we discover, yes, there is, and this is what it is, and then we go back and look at the case of the moral, and it does this random goodness particle thingy, and supposing we already know this is the true objective morality, the morality is just completely different from anything we think about it. We'd just be wrong. It's like, it just doesn't have anything to do with murder in this case, because
it would be exactly how subjectivists think morality is actually.
No, that would be wrong, because again, subjectivists think there is no objective particle that determines this. If there is an objective particle, it's objective. So even if it operates in the same way as a subjective morality, in it's just that whatever
it
you subjectively
explains the
think,
discourse in the same way. Yeah.
Right. So if you subjectively think eating pizza with pineapple is immoral, and it happens to be the case that this objective law generates goodness particles to correspond to that belief, then it would effectively work the same way as subjective morality would, but it would still be objectively true. It'd still be a moral realist position.
So I think that in the case of subjectivists, right, it would be pretty weird to be a subjectivist and say that there's a thing called a goodness particle, But I think that in the way that you're talking about this, someone could be a moral subjectivist and say that there are these things called goodness particles, right, that just don't have anything to do with our moral discourse or make it true or false, because there's no because what would make moral realism in the true is if there's some fact of the matter about whether murder is right or wrong, right? But there is no fact of the matter in this world that we've stipulated about whether or not murder is right or wrong. There's just a fact of the matter about goodness particles existing, but goodness particles have nothing to do about moral discourse or moral propositions. They're just goodness particles that exist in people's brains sometimes and don't in other cases.
Yeah, and
so,
like, why are we calling these things goodness particles in the first place, right? Isn't
Because
like
they're labeled that way in the Platonic realm.
yeah, but isn't like the definition of goodness like an open question or whatever? Like you can say X is good and good.
It's hypothetical.
Something
we're,
else.
We're hypothetically.
Yeah, no. I understand that.
Yeah.
But if it's just like how moral
You're saying-
realists usually think about it.
You're saying
right, is they say,
You are muted.
Yeah,
and unmuted.
it's a bit of a misnomer. Sorry, it's kind of like if I invented, I don't know, like we're trying to describe gravity, right? And then that's like a really terrible example because like all the stuff I appeal to has gravity. Maybe like photons of light or something, and then I'm also going to just call like this thing over here photons, and then we're getting like confused because there's this other thing that we've given the same name, but that's something else. And
yeah, because what moral realism is in my head, right, is that like you'd have a situation where like someone is stabbing someone, right, and like all the natural facts can be one way, and you can't have like two worlds where all the natural facts are the same, and then one situation's good and one situation's bad. But in this case, the only thing that's making something good is like the evaluators, like particles that are coming up their nose and, you know, like messing up with their brain, right? You know, so it just seems like we're talking about something totally different from what I think the moral realist is trying to like.
So moral realism is just the position that there are stance-independent truth values for moral claims. That's all it means. How?
Yeah, no. I understand
Stop.
I understand that.
How they're true doesn't matter. So if what makes something true is a particle, it's moral realism. If what makes something true is a
particle,
but then I think
particle, right?
Well, I think what we have to do
it doesn't matter
then,
what makes it true. If it's made true by a particle, moral realism is true. That's all. It's just a hypothetical.
I think we all agree with that, though. I think what the contentious claim is, right, is it in this thought experiment world that Oscar kind of stipulated before, it seems that there isn't a fact of the matter about whether or not murder is wrong, for example, which is the condition that has to be met in order for moral realism to be true.
No, that's the first part. So moral realism doesn't entail that murder must be wrong. Like there could be a moral realism.
No, I'm not. Yeah, but whether it's true or it has to be true or false, though, right?
No. So murder can be amoral. It can be completely not a moral statement. It could be like picking up a rock.
Okay.
So all we need for moral realism is for some moral statements to be true or false. There could be like a single one. And
if something is neutral, it isn't wrong. So like so Nathan said it has to be wrong or not wrong. Part of not wrong is neutral, right?
Well, I think he meant moral or immoral. So obviously, if it's
no, he meant immoral or not immoral.
Yeah, okay. I guess I understand what's being said then. So it's like, look, there in the worlds you'd agree to where moral realism is true, right? It's like it's wrong to murder people in like those standard worlds, but like there's no fact of the matter about whether phones are right or wrong, or like like this rock is right. Is this rock good or is this rock bad? Well, there's no there's all sorts of propositions where you can't say whether or not that proposition is right or wrong. But I think that what's happened. Yeah, sorry. Okay, this rock is good, right?
Wait, is that a proposition?
Well, we can.
Yeah,
it's
like saying murder is good. Murder is good, right? Is that true or false?
This rock sitting on the table is good. That's fine. So there could be a case where that could be moral. Like if there is some moral law or God, for example, and God's nature determines morality or something, and his nature determines that the rock being on the table is good, then that would be morally good. And so it doesn't. Any particular action could be moral or immoral or amoral. There's no logical determining that it must be one way or the other. In our universe, we tend to think certain actions like murdering and punching babies are morally relevant, but that's doesn't matter to objective morality. Completely irrelevant. That's just our personal subjective biases. And so for moral realism to be true, it just means there needs to be one statement of any kind that is morally a true statement. And it could be anything, depending on whatever determining the morality is in that universe.
But
But some
Wait,
people think
on-
like
on error theory, isn't it true that like things are not
False.
like neutral?
They're false. Yes, the moral
Like
statements are
they're
false.
not immoral. They're not. Yeah.
No,
So that is a
error
true
theory
state of
says that
affairs, right?
error theory says that for any statement that says something is either moral or immoral is just false. It's not moral.
And neutral.
I don't
no,
know.
they're false.
I
So
don't-
like any evaluative statement, it will be like false. So like, oh, like the bread is good, the bread is bad. They're both false.
I think the neutral would probably also apply, or I don't.
Yeah,
bread is
maybe.
neutral.
Right.
Is false. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So wait, you said any. Wait, so wouldn't that be a realist theory then?
Yes, so-
Because there are stance-independent facts like
yes,
murder is not immoral. That is a true.
right.
fact.
But get off of murder,
Yeah.
because again, this could be literally any sentence, any proposition could be a moral proposition, and if that proposition is true, moral realism is true. So if the moral proposition is morality is whatever the good particles pop out of, that's a moral realist position. That's an objectivist position. Even if it pops out at random intervals or for no reason at all, or contradictory things, for one person sees a murder and gets them and one person doesn't get them, doesn't make a difference. It's still a moral objectivist, moral realist position.
Yeah.
The rule is just whatever goodness particles pop out of, essentially. Now I agree that would not correspond to our experience of morality. So that would contradict our evidence of morality in our universe, but that wouldn't make it subjectivist. It would still be an
I
objectivist
understand what you're
model. It'd
saying.
just be a very weird one.
So, like in the
Yeah, we have
example,
used
in the
words.
example that kind of started this whole thing that Oscar gave of where there are two people, one of them can sort of cause good particles in their brain by saying something's good, and one of them can say it's bad. Okay, there's no way for them to like resolve this dispute about like who's right in the case of of what they're saying about the murder. But there is a fact of them. Well, it's kind of irrelevant. Well, actually, neither of them are right, because there's no goodness particles in the case of the murder. But in that world, right, there is a true stance-independent fact, which is that one of their brains is good, right? Because that's what has the goodness particles. And so there is a true stance-independent fact, but it has nothing to do with the murder in that case. So it is a realist theory.
Yes, exactly. It's a very strange hypothetical, and I appreciate him
what
preventing it.
what was the true moral proposition? You said the brain, but the brain isn't the proposition.
So okay, you in the thought experiment that you painted, right?
Yeah,
people based off of their preferences, whatever, can kind of like generate goodness particles in their own brain when so there's these two people, and they both witness the murder. One of them says that's good, and the other one says that's bad, right? Both of them are actually false, because there's no fact of the matter about the murder in that world, but there is at least one true proposition.
What is the proposition?
The person who generated the good, referring to the person who generated the good particles in their brain is good.
Yes,
the brain is good.
Well, so in that universe,
or they are good, right? Wherever the particle supervenes or appears or whatever, that is good.
Right. So in
I have a question about this example.
Wait. So in that universe, the only thing that is moral is wherever goodness particles emit. That is morality. The emergence of goodness particles is morality. Murder isn't. Rocks aren't. Emergence of goodness particles. So if
I think we're
But go ahead.
But the theory wasn't that like whatever area contains goodness particles are good. The goodness particles were just causing emotions, right? We're not saying like any area that contains goodness particles are good.
Well, I think that was how we initially started off, and then we started thinking about how can the goodness particles come apart from those cases, and that's where we went down this rabbit hole, because we were trying to do in order to construct reductios of the goodness particle position was to generate worlds in which all the states of affairs were identical, but there was like either no fact of the matter morally, or there were contradictory facts of the matter morally that generated, and that would be a problem for the theory.
Why? Okay, let me ask that clearly then. So why is let's say the goodness particles are in the brain. Why would the brain be good just because it has goodness particles in it?
By stipulation in that world.
No. The stipulation is that goodness particles cause emotions. It's not that wherever they are, there is goodness.
Well, that wasn't. I don't think. Maybe I misunderstood what you were saying explicitly, right? But I think that's how I understood. I understood that the goodness particles were the truth makers, as in that
not
where they
their
exist.
position or something like that.
Well, I thought that was what we were talking
Yeah,
about. So,
yeah,
for example,
so-
in the case of pizza, when we said pizza was good. Pizza was good because it had goodness particles. Or if we said, I don't know, giving to charity is good. Every time someone was actually giving to charity, there are goodness particles there, like involved in that action or something.
Okay, this is how I understood it. Maybe we shouldn't call them goodness particles. There is some particle that causes emotions that makes us feel that something is moral, like punching babies, right?
Yeah, that's not
There's
how
some
I was
particle-
thinking about it. That's
Yeah,
that's how
let me,
I
let me
understood it.
clarify. There are particles which are goodness. The particle themselves is the goodness. And those particles are emitted from certain things, and then they hit your brain and cause you to feel things. So
Why can't I? Wait. Why can't I call photons goodness particles then?
you could, but that's an epistemic
Yeah, so then
question.
the moral realism is true.
No.
The universe has
Stop. It doesn't matter. If it is like, suppose there are no brains and there's some proposition, this universe has moral realism. That means in the universe, there is some essence of morality there. The universe gets to decide what that is. We don't. We can call whatever we want there. We're just going to be right or wrong. The universe has this thing, and this thing determines morality, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but if it's the case, then it's moral realist. Now, what we think is that if there is such a thing, it's going to correspond to our emotions when we see people punching babies. Whatever morality is has to correspond to that in some way. It doesn't. There's no logical necessity that whatever morality is, it has to correspond to our feelings of people punching babies. It could be that photons are morality and we're just wrong about it. But we think that whatever morality is probably going to correspond to our intuitions in some sense. Does that make sense?
I don't really believe in essences, so no.
Well, do you think it's like an epistemic possibility or something? Yeah.
No, okay. It's
me, not epistemically possible.
I can explain. I'm not that radical. So it seems like the only reason we're calling this moral realism now is because we decided to call them goodness particles.
No, forget us. Say the universe was.
But then I
formed.
need essences because to decide that those are the goodness particles, and I don't believe in those.
Is there such a thing as a graviton? Is that a gravity particle?
Yeah, there are gravitons.
Right. So there's something in reality that causes some particular effects, and that's determined not by us. That's determined by the nature of reality, right? So in the nature of reality, there could be some particle that determines all the moral things in the universe. And it's not an essence, it's just a particle that's just like the graviton. It's just the moralitron or something.
But why call it that? Why not call it
we don't call it anything. We're saying that there is a
Yeah.
particle which
So why
determines
call it
all of the
morality?
things in the universe. We don't call it doesn't matter what we call it. There is a particle that determines all such propositions in the universe, just like there's a graviton that determines all gravity in the universe.
Well, maybe this would help Oscar to rephrase the question this way. Do you think that there's an epistemically possible state of affairs, right, where there is a classical truth maker for meta-ethics that makes moral propositions true, and that truth maker is a particular kind of substance that exists whenever there's a true moral claim? Do you think that that's an epistemic possibility?
Like maybe there is something in that direction, but it really looks like the only thing we did here was to say there are some particles and they are good particles. And if there are good particles somewhere,
I agree. It's completely gerrymandered. I think. I think what the question is.
I think the name is confusing us.
So maybe the first. I agree with that, but maybe the first thing to establish, right, would be to say, do you think that in order for some version of moral realism to be true, there would have to be truth makers for moral propositions?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. Okay. So then, could those truth makers be some kind of like physical thing in the world that always exists whenever there's a true moral claim and makes that moral claim true?
There's some kind of language confusion here. I guess we just decide, like, if we want to say that certain sentences are true, we can just set up truth conditions for when those sentences are true.
So I guess the question.
I can just say moral realism is true if there are photons, right?
Yeah. Well, hang on. I think the question isn't to ask you whether or not you think this theory is true, right? But the question is, so if the world were like this, right? If this were the case, that we had these truth makers and there was a substance, a physical substance that made these moral propositions true, would we have a kind of moral realism, and is that a possible state of affairs?
It's possible that I'm just deeply confused on how language works, I guess.
Well, I want to go back to the gravity example for a second. So
Yeah.
is it rational to say that we don't get to define gravity? Gravity is a thing in the universe. We don't get to make up definitions. Our definitions just don't matter. Because there's
We
a thing
decide
there.
what to call it, I guess. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but are completely irrelevant. There is a thing there and it causes some very particular effect. And if there is a thing there that causes this effect, we don't get any opinion on it. So we're saying that morality is an effect caused by a thing that we just don't know about. Is it possible that morality, we've made up the word, we don't know if it's there or not, but suppose that morality is an effect and it's caused by something out there. Would that thing be morality, just like gravitons are gravity?
Wait, you're saying you're defining morality is an effect.
No,
Can you say that again?
No, morality, the things we see are an effect of something, just like gravity is an effect of a graviton. So there's a particle that causes this effect. It's fair to say that gravitons are gravity, right?
I don't know if I use that language that way, but I sort of understand what you mean.
Sure. So
Would you,
like gravitons are gravity.
You'd say they make. Would you say that gravitons make the proposition that gravity exists here true?
Together
Is it the presence
with...
of gravitons? So there's a proposition, right? Gravitons are here, right? Now, is that proposition made true by the presence of gravitons in the world?
Wait, the first sentence was gravity is here or something?
Yeah, or that there is gravity here, or the Earth has gravity, something like that.
Yeah. There is gravity, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And then the question is, so suppose that do you understand what it would mean? How do I ask this? Is that proposition made true by there being these things called gravitons in the world that are there?
They're being made true by two things, I think. They're being made true by there being gravitons, and that we have set up the truth condition for the sentence "there is gravity" to reflect those things. So you need two things, right? Like us to have set up the rules, like what the words mean, and the facts.
But let's so I think that what we're doing here, so you see that moving part of we've set up the rules of what the words mean. So I think that it will be the contentious point, because I think that what we're talking about is we're assuming a model of language here where independently of how anyone talks about anything, there are propositions which are true or false, and those propositions are being expressed in language, regardless of which language that you talk in, right? And the proposition here is a kind of picture of the way that reality is, or something like that, like conditions in reality which have to be met. So you could have a language which was like square, square, triangle, which expressed the same proposition or something. Just in the same way that you can say, I don't know, 1 + 1 = 2, and I can say ein und ein.
Like we can agree on how to use language.
Yeah,
and we can.
And the point is that
agree.
So the idea in these cases is that there's a proposition, something that's understood in the mind, that's being expressed in different languages, but we're trying to say, of the proposition, right, is it made true or false by states of affairs in the world?
Yeah, I guess the difference in the morality case is that it doesn't seem like we have agreed on like what facts of the world is being pointed out by the word morality, right? Like TjumpsChair seems to think that.
Oh yeah, you can think this is false. I agree that you can think this theory is false, right? Is actually false. Just in the way that you can be an anti-realist about gravitons, right? You can think that the proposition gravitons, there are gravitons here, actually is neither true nor false, right? It's just something that some people express, or maybe you think that it's false, but it's a convenient shorthand that scientists use as they engage in certain types of activity. You can be an anti-realist, right? And think it's actually false that there are gravitons, but it's at least an epistemically possible position for realism to be true, that there are these entities called gravitons that make the proposition true. And I think that that's all that's trying to be expressed in the case of the moral realism, that there's an epistemically possible position where there's a moral particle that makes it true, but I don't think anyone's saying that that is actually the way that things are.
Look. Let's say it like this then. like if we use language the way TJump proposes that we use language, where there is this connection that the sentence morality is objective is true if there are moral particles, and then we say also that there are moral particles, then because I understood the rules of the game we set up, I'm gonna say the first sentence is true.
I think that that's right. Yeah.
I think that was just a fancy way of saying yes.
No, that's I'm just saying there's a moving part which it seems like you're skipping.
Yeah, but I think that this all pivots either way on your view of language and propositions, because I think that what you're describing is, a non-representational view of language there, right? Where you have to be socialized into using words in a particular way in order to have this discourse take place at all. And I agree that, this is my approach to, I happen to take that as well. And I'm just pretending I don't believe that for the sake of having a conversation, assuming propositions and things like that. But yeah, I don't think that there are these representational propositions. I don't think there are truth makers. But yeah.
I'm not really sure how truth makers are supposed to work. Is it something like you're setting up the conditions of truth or something?
Yeah, it's the way again, this hinges upon, I think, accepting the idea that there's things called propositions first, right? Which are sort of representational mental entities. And then the idea is that in order for the proposition, which is that representational mental state, to be true or false, there has to be a certain way things are in the world, right? So there's a whole bunch of propositions like, there is a red cube in front of me or something. And in order for there to be a red cube in front of me, the world must be such that, and then here's a picture of a red cube.
I was just confused because it seemed like the only reason we were saying that it felt like we reached a conclusion that where we said there was morality was because we sort of decided to call them goodness particles, and that was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And it seemed like we were like, oh no, we're not. It's not just that we're calling the goodness particle. They have the essence of being the goodness particle or something. And I was just like, this seems strange to me.
I think you're confusing us applying definitions to there is a thing in reality which causes all of these effects. So like, we don't just define gravitons as having gravity. It is the fact they do have gravity. They are gravity. They have the essence of being gravity. We don't get to define it. Right.
So that might be where you disagree even, right? That could be where
so the last move is that we want a sentence to be true, right? We want to have the sentence like objective morality exists or something. That sentence is we want that to be true in the end, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So it is a linguistic question.
No.
You need to.
So is it true that gravity exists?
Those are words. That depends on what the words mean.
Sure, but let's forget all what the words mean and say we can generally understand.
And I'm saying let's not.
Is what I intend by the words true? So I can forget all the words. None of the words matter at this point. Is what I intend by the words true?
Yeah.
So then the words don't matter anymore. We can get rid of all the linguistics. All linguistics gone. We can just say, try to understand what the speaker intends by the words. Forget the words. Linguistics is irrelevant here. So
but then
So if I think does gravity exist? Now, none of the words matter because I'm asking about what I intend by the words, not the words.
Yes.
Is that there is this actual force that actually exists and no one gets an opinion on it? And that's true, right? Gravity exists.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it possible that there is a similar force of morality that actually exists?
There's this where you say that morality just exists.
Just like gravity, it's a literal thing in the universe.
I guess this is a bit confusing because, I know what you intend with gravity, and I don't know what you intend with morality.
It's a particle, just like gravity. We just haven't discovered it yet. So it causes all the good things and bad things to be discernible.
So morality exists means there exists a particle that makes certain sentences true.
No, it has nothing. The sentences are irrelevant here. So we're talking about what do I mean by the words, which means there is a force exactly like gravity. It's just a force that permeates the universe. It does nothing with sentences. Sentences don't matter here.
Okay.
The sentences we make correspond to that thing. They are trying to describe that thing. Just like when I say gravity exists, that sentence is describing an actually existing force that is in the universe. It doesn't make the sentence true or whatever. Our sentence is just describing that thing. So is it possible there's an actually existing force of morality?
What does it?
I have no
this
idea what
force
it's made of.
do?
Is it possible?
Okay, is this possible? There is a force. Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
That's it. That's all we were saying.
But
It's
why is it
possible.
morality?
How is gravity gravity?
I just answered the question. There
Yeah.
could be a force.
Yeah.
I think just
And
by
you're saying, could there be
stipulation, in the possible world, it's just by stipulation.
Well, I
right?
think he's asking a more
So we're
fundamental question. That why is gravity gravity? What makes it gravity?
We have
Why is it?
stipulated.
Yeah, it's gravity essence, I guess, or something like that would
Like-
be. It has
Is this
gravity.
your answer, T-Jump? It has gravity essence.
Sort of. I mean, like if I say
That's essentially what it is for something to be gravity.
yeah. So I'd say
Okay.
that reality has a property, and that property is gravity. And that's what makes it gravity, is that reality has this property. That's it. Like that's fundamentally what it is. So if there was some property of morality baked into the universe, the fact that the universe had this property would make it morality. We don't get to define it.
Then I might disagree on the gravity thing. I think it might be emergent. So I think it might not
Oh,
be like a fundamental property.
That's fine too. It doesn't matter if it's emergent or fundamental. Either one, it would still be objective. Either one. So we can say
Well,
morality
I
is
mean, we
emergent.
went through that. The world, would you like things fall down and light spent around the sun and stuff like that. Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't. So space time. You can say space time if you want. Whatever. Like, is space time a fundamental thing in the universe?
Probably not.
Just pick one thing you want.
I-
Quantum fields. Quantum fields are
Yeah,
fundamental. Okay, quantum
Sure.
fields are fundamental. Could there be a quantum field of morality that we just don't know about yet?
I don't know why you call it morality.
Why do we call it?
Like, what is it? What is it about it that?
Why do we call something
morality?
a quantum field?
I guess when
It
you
doesn't matter what you call
Exactly.
it.
It's there.
I
It's
guess-
there, regardless of what you
I guess
call it.
so. Here's
No, but
I don't think
you're
Tom is
saying
saying. I don't think Tom is saying that it is morality in virtue of his calling it morality. I think what Tom's saying is that he's got the correct isomorphism between the essence in the world, right, and the linguistic usage that he's advocating for. He's saying that they like link up in the right sort of way in his theory.
Yeah, there's something weird about this. Yeah.
So gravity is a force that pulls things down. It's not actually down, but like
It's not a force. Yeah.
Sure, I'm not a scientist. But morality is it just something that makes you feel bad when certain things happen?
Oh, that exists for sure. There exist things that make us feel, oh no.
Yeah, but I think
Sometimes.
morality has like an ought baked into
No.
it, right? Or
Yeah, so T-Jump doesn't believe in
there's-
ought, right?
Well, I don't.
There's
I don't,
multiple
yeah.
versions of morality. Some of them have ought, some of them don't.
If all you're saying is like, is there a force that makes us feel like, oh no, sometimes, and oh yes, sometimes? Like, sure, that's epistemically
Well,
possible. Yeah.
So if you were asking me the question about what I genuinely believe, right, then my answer would be that our linguistic discourse that we're trained into around good and bad is connected to these feelings that we have, right? So the feelings that we have play a role in this discourse that we're trained into. We know the correct conditions of use to use these words, and part of the correct conditions for us include these feelings that we have, and that would be the way that I think about morality.
would that count as moral realism, or?
No, I'm a quietist when it comes to the meta-ethical position, because I'm not sure that we have like legitimate, well-formed questions being asked. Right?
Let's try this about magic. Let's say, what would it mean for magic to be objectively real? Let's say that there could be like people use a spell, do Avada Kedavra, whatever. If it's that's not just us doing language. There's actually some phenomenon in the universe which is caused by some force in the universe, right?
So I agree, it's both, right? It's a bit of language and it's a bit of fact.
Well, no. So our language is that we have created a label to describe this particular phenomenon, but the phenomenon is an objective phenomenon, right? And if this phenomenon is caused by some kind of a force and not just our psychology, it's a realist phenomenon, right?
But do you agree that it's also matter? Like, if you and I just have very different definitions of what magic is, that will confuse when you ask me, like, oh, but
sure. That's why
yeah.
that's why we're going to start with just the phenomenon. We're going to say whatever is causing that phenomenon, that's magic. Magic refers to whatever is causing that phenomenon. Is that fair?
Yeah.
We can do that.
Cause Yeah, something like photons cause my emotions in some ways, right?
Forget that right now. We can just say there's a phenomenon in reality, and whatever is causing that is magic. Now, maybe it's just our imagination. The photons hit us and our brains do all fuzzy stuff to make us imagine that there's magic. And so it's not really there.
Yeah.
That would be a subjective model. But maybe there actually is some kind of energy stuff that is the Avada Kedavra spell that shoots out of a wand and kills somebody. That's an objectivist spell. There's a thing there in reality, and it's caused by some force in nature, right?
Could I convince you to use realist and anti-realist instead?
Sure. It's the same thing, imaginary and real.
It's not for me, so it's really confusing.
Sure,
I have to do a redo every time. Yeah.
Sure. So
I
there's
agree.
a
I agree
realist,
with
there's a
everything
magic
you said.
realist where the magic is actually there objectively and it actually kills somebody. And there's an anti-realist who says it's just in your imagination. There's not actually there. It's just your imagination. And so the realist is saying that there's a force that's causing this magic stuff to work. That you cast a spell of Avada Kedavra, there's this force of nature, and it's governing these laws, causing these things to happen. Anti-realist is like, no, it's just all in your imagination. It's just not real at all. Now,
I think the important thing in the realist conception is the notion of truth maker, right? The notion of proposition, truth maker, and essence that makes it true.
Well, I think those are too technical. I want to avoid those at all costs. I just want to say that, so there is a thing in reality independent of our imagination. That's a realist position. And there's just our imagination, which makes us think there's that thing there, but it's not. That's the anti-realist. Is that clear enough?
Yeah. I think the reason Nathan said that was that he said, like, T-Jump, you might have some metaphysical baggage here that might make this weird.
I don't
like essences and propositions and stuff like that.
We don't know any of that stuff. We just know there is a thing that exists like gravity, and it's causing magic to kill people in the realist version, and in the anti-realist version, it doesn't exist. Right? That's the only difference.
Yeah, it's like placebo or something. Like,
yes,
you think you're gonna be killed, and maybe their heart stops.
Yeah, just psychological. It's not actually there.
Yeah, now, I understand that perfectly.
So it's easy to say that magic is a potential law of physics we haven't discovered yet that does stuff, right? It's easy to imagine. Very easy.
Yeah.
So why can't you just imagine the same thing about morality?
Because so what the thing that the morality force would be doing would just be to cause us to have certain emotions.
No, it would be we have emotions in response to that, just like we see it. We see the morality, just like we see the spell.
But what would be the difference between a world where the force exists and a world where the force doesn't exist?
Well, you could posit lots of differences, but I don't see why that matters to the question.
I needed to understand, I guess.
Or I don't.
Because like in the magic example you gave me, it was really clear what the difference was, and now it's like not clear at all.
So I think what Oscar's stipulating is he's taking this kind of idea of proposition and correspondence.
Just to answer real quick, like in the case where there is magic and it kills people, and where there's not magic and people die of a placebo, there's no difference there that we can see.
I think this is the problem, though, because then the propositions don't actually express anything different. I mean, this is the thing that the logical positivists
in the magic one, there is a law. There is a law actually creating these spells.
And we can find out about it in the future.
I think Oscar's saying is that that's a linguistic. That's a thing that's being said, right? But in the world, there isn't actually, because there's no difference between the two worlds, right? Because there isn't like something different that actually happens in reality in the two cases. So it's said that there's a law, but the thing happens with the same amount of regularity in our sense experience. Like, what would we have to experience in order for it not to be true that there was a law?
Well, I can say that if we zoom in far enough, we'll be able to literally measure the law in one universe and not the other. Like, I can just pause.
Yeah, like some test we could do.
Sure.
We could
if we get powerful enough microscopes, we'll be able to literally see the waves of the law be there. Okay, that's the difference. And the same thing is true of morality.
No. What is the difference between the two cases in the morality? Like
same thing. We can zoom in with a microscope and we'll see the little wiggly thingies that are causing this.
Causing what? The motions.
Moral phenomenon.
What is the moral phenomenon?
So just in the magic case, we see the magic spell. In the morality case, we see the morality.
I don't understand what it means to see the morality.
What that
like
So like when we see the magic, we get a sense experience, And when we see the morality, we get an emotional
The
experience.
morality. Like, are you meaning like we're seeing someone get hurt, and like if we had tools, we can see them like glowing red, maybe.
Sure.
Like we can, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, there could be a force that does that.
Thank you. That's literally
I
the
wouldn't
only thing we've been
I would-
talking about.
All right, so
I think Oscar's
wouldn't call that
problem,
morality.
right,
What's
is
the
like he would
point
just
of
call this
positive
like a desire particle or something. He wouldn't call it a
Yeah,
goodness
something
particle.
else.
Yeah,
Like it's
Because
a
it
red
seems
glowy
like-
particle.
yeah,
Well,
because
yeah,
you could just have
why do
different
we
background
call-
beliefs.
Why do we call
And-
this magic? It's because we use the word magic to describe a phenomenon. Why do we call this morality? Because we use the word morality to describe a phenomenon. What makes it morality
Yeah,
is the
but-
same
but
thing
goodness-
that makes it gravity.
Definition of goodness is going to be an open question, right?
The definitions
So-
literally don't matter. The definitions
Well,
are irrelevant.
I think
All
what makes it
definitions are
morality is
irrelevant.
our use.
Oh my gosh. No,
Yeah,
T-Jump,
me
you're
too.
wrong. Like,
No.
I don't know.
Reality is reality independent of definitions. The things that exist in reality.
God,
I
are
agree.
true.
No,
So-
the
so if
particles
morality-
exist,
wait,
they
wait,
can make you
wait, wait,
desire.
If morality is one of those things, you don't get a definition anymore. If it is one of those things that actually exist, you don't
Yeah,
get
if
a
you
definition.
condition,
Yeah, but I
like, if you
think the
condition
problem
on a
here is that
definition,
you-
of course, that's going to be
The problem here is that we're only corresponding statements to more statements, right? We're not corresponding statements
Oh my
to the world.
gosh.
So look, okay. So say that we find out in the future that some of the like bad stuff, you know, when someone gets like tortured, they glow in a certain way that we can detect in the future, and when someone gets stolen from, they glow red in the future. So you find out this, and then me and Max says, "Look, this is really cool. They found out a new physical law that, and we call it the red glow law." And then you, T-Jump, you come in and you say, it's the moral law. Like, why would you be correct and we would be incorrect? Why
The
would
same
we?
motivating
The same reason if you just started calling gravity something else, you'd just be wrong. Like the words
I would
literally don't matter. If there is a
T-Jump,
phenomenon
I'm
in
a
We
moral
reality,
call it a
realist. I don't-
different thing in Swedish. Swedish
Yes,
people
yes,
aren't
I understand
wrong.
that. No. So
Yeah,
like,
so that's false.
no. If you said gravity it's just a definition and it's not a real thing, you'd just be a dumbass. It is a real thing. So if there is a
The
real
word
thing,
is a
I'm not
We
sure
definition,
about
agree that
and
they're
it's a real
things
thing.
here.
no.
Like, Yeah.
Gravity.
I
the
think
We're
force-
real
all
essence
agreeing
is a more
they-
scholastic. Like,
if you said gravity was not a real force and it was just a psychological definition, you're a dumbass because it is a
Let's
real
go.
thing.
No,
What
no,
if
no.
gravity
Let's go
means
back to
something else in
Oscar's
Swedish
example,
then?
right? The tortured
No,
person.
it
glows
doesn't matter what
red,
it means to
and the
anybody.
torture.
Anybody who says gravity and what we mean by the words is a force in nature is not a force in nature is wrong. They're a dumbass. And so if
Yeah, you
the same
added
thing
stuff
applies to
in that
morality-
sentence.
yeah, but look, you're corresponding to statements, right? You're saying force in nature. That's what. But the point is that you're corresponding statements to statements, right? Force in nature is just more language.
No, again, I've already addressed this. I said what I mean by the words. Forget the language. You have to make the sentence correspond to what I intend to
Yeah,
mean by the
I'm
words.
saying I know, but I'm saying what you can't ever do that because you can only offer more words. You can only correspond the words to more words. You
Yeah,
can
but
never
I
take
no,
off
no, I
your
can say
mind and stand as on.
the truth
side
value
on, as it were.
is dependent on what I mean by the words, not the words themselves. I've now eliminated all words. The words are gone. So you can't argue
Well,
with
you've
my
not
words
because you
anymore.
just told me that in more words, right?
Yes, but as long as you understand the meaning,
You didn't take my mind and make me stand on and see the relationship
This
between
doesn't
the
matter.
propositions you intended
Wait,
and the world. Instead, you told
Yeah.
me more words.
Yeah.
Me
So
and
T-Jump,
Oscar aren't.
I think I can agree with you here. So let's say if a person says gravity doesn't exist, and by gravity they mean what you mean by gravity, then they are a dumbass, right?
yeah.
But if they say gravity doesn't exist, and what they mean by gravity is unicorns, well then they're a smartass, right?
No.
What? Why
It's
not?
irrelevant to the conversation. The point is, there is something.
Wait,
there are
wait.
things in. Wait, stop. There are things in reality, and what defines them as those things is reality. Reality gets to say this is a property that exists. You don't. I don't. Definitions don't.
I agree.
So if there is a property
What
of
do you
morality,
think my disagreement
stop.
was?
If there is a property of morality that exists and reality says it exists, you don't get a definition anymore. It is the
Luke.
case that this is morality. And anybody uses the word someone else, they're just wrong.
So, in the scenario we talked about earlier, we agree, me, Max, and you, we all agree that people glow red in certain circumstances. We call it the red glow force. You call it the morality force.
Reality
Why?
says it's morality. Reality wins. You're wrong.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, this is what I'm
Reality
saying.
doesn't
Reality
talk.
has properties.
How is reality like?
Reality
telling you
has
this?
shut
What
up.
are you
Shut
talking
up.
about?
Shut the fuck up. Reality has properties. You don't get to define those properties. Reality defines those
I
properties.
agree.
If
Yeah,
one
but
of
you're
those
just
properties,
telling
stop
us what
talking.
those properties are,
Stop.
Tom.
If
Yeah, but I
reality
think there's
determines
something
that it's
to learn here,
morality,
Tom.
you don't get an opinion. If one
Sure,
of the
but-
properties is morality, if morality is one of those properties, like mass is one of those
Yes,
properties.
but you're
you
just
don't
telling us
get an
words,
opinion.
aren't you? So
No.
the thing is that you just that's what you
mass
do. What, you're
isn't
not
just
offering
a
us
word;
words.
it's a thing in reality. It is an
But we
actual
all
existing
agree
thing.
on the thing.
I
Like
don't
in the
care.
scenario.
I don't care if you agree. You don't get to agree on mass. Reality tells you this is mass. You don't get an opinion.
Well, our
You
activity.
keep telling me that I disagree with a part that I don't disagree with. I agree with you on that part, and then I disagree with you on another part, and
Right,
then you
so-
say,
so
"But
just-
blah, blah, blah."
So
Just
just like
listen to
if,
me,
if
dude.
reality said there was a thing such as morality, just like there is a thing such as mass, and it's one of the properties, then you're wrong. It's just that simple.
Reality is a certain way, and in this scenario, we all agree on that, and we disagree on what to call it.
No.
Yes, the only difference between me and Max's and your position here is what we call it. That's the only difference.
That is completely irrelevant to anything I've said.
I stipulate that the only difference is that we call it another thing.
Right.
What's
and you're
wrong with
wrong,
that?
Because if reality has a property,
Because
and
the word
property,
floats above it and it says morality.
The
If
particle
there
prefers to
are
be called.
actual properties, there are actual properties that have an actual nature, and those actual properties, you don't get an opinion on it. You don't get to call it
Yeah.
what you want. It has
And
a
they're
property.
unlabeled.
Sure,
They
no,
don't
have
come
a
with a
particular.
label.
They have a particular nature, and the nature is the label.
Yeah, but they don't have an English word label.
Who cares about
right?
the English word? What matters is they
So
have a
why
nature,
can't
and the
we
nature
use
isn't up for
another
debate.
label?
You can use whatever label you want. It doesn't make a difference.
No, you said we were wrong for using another label.
Yes, if you use a label that doesn't correspond to reality, you're wrong.
Yeah, they either think there aren't labels
Yeah,
that
you're
correspond to reality, because like it's not like science in English is better than science in German, right? Is Naturwissenschaften better than science? Like
That's irrelevant to the argument here. So this is
No,
not
that's
hard to
exactly
understand.
the point.
If morality is a thing, like mass is a thing, and that morality is real, you don't get an opinion on it anymore.
okay,
That's what I mean by the
is
word.
Okay, so is sodium called sodium or is it called natrium?
What that doesn't
Because it
relevant,
comes
they're
with
the
a
same
label,
thing.
right? So you
Yeah,
said
so what
If
is
you
it
are
called in
referring
reality?
to the same thing and both
Yeah.
exist, that's fine.
right.
But it's
Yeah,
still
that's what's
objectively real.
happening.
It's still an objective, realist
Yes.
position. They're both objective. They're
Yes.
both realists.
So me and Max are saying, yes, the red glow force is real. And you're saying, yes, the morality force is real. And we're all intending the exact same thing when we're saying this. We're just using different labels. And you're saying that our label is wrong. That's really confused.
What? So like I'm saying, if there is actually a thing in reality causing this, it's objective. Like that's the debate was
Yeah.
about: is it objective and not subjective? It's
No.
objective.
No, we're saying
I don't
we are
care what you
calling it
call
the
it.
red glow.
These dumb linguistic
No,
arguments are a
but
bunch
you
of
said we were
morons.
wrong for calling it that.
Yes, you are. You were wrong for calling it that. You're a dumbass.
Can I make a
linguistic,
point?
all
I haven't-
semantic
Wait,
arguments
that's
are
fine.
I haven't
dumbass.
said much.
All semantic arguments are dumbass arguments. Every single
Okay,
one.
So
can I
why are
try
you doing one?
Hey,
I'm
Oscar,
not.
can I
You
try
are.
something?
Maybe let Max try.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so for me, like evaluative terms, right? Those are going to give me certain like action guiding norms. They're going to give me a motivation, right? So it seems like like if I was to refer to something in the world, it's not really going to get us like the essential properties of what goodness, badness are. It seems like it's more closer to something like the experience yellow, right? The experience of whiteness, the experience of like roundness or something like that, something internal. So like you could say like, oh, if you're a hedonist, you can say, oh, pleasure is good. But then if you tell that to me, I'm going to be like, okay, goodness is pleasure. So what, right? Like you're probably just using a different definition than me. So like, I don't know how like we would define this thing in the first place. And so you could point to a moral property and you can say that that gives you certain, action guiding norms or whatever. But then like, I might just disagree with that. Like, I don't know how we like bridge that gap, so
Dumbass semantic arguments, completely irrelevant. There are a set of propositions that accurately describe reality. What you label them just don't matter.
Wait,
So
wait. So you
I
think
think what
experience
you did
yellow
was a
is
semantic
just
argument.
So imagine there's a
A
God who
semantic-
knows literally everything and knows literally all of the propositions. He's like, this one's morality. You're done. Shut the fuck up. There you go. Done.
oh,
This
so
one
the
is
law
X,
is just like
There is
the
a
thing that
property
makes
of
me
nature.
have-
There are properties, and there are some that are correct and some that are incorrect. Doesn't matter what you call them. If there's a God who just knows them all, he's like, okay, here are the right ones, here are the wrong ones, go away.
Yeah.
And if morality
why-
is one of those, you don't get an opinion anymore. You're done.
Well, that's a subjectivist theory. Divine command theory is a subjectivist.
No. God
theory,
knows
so,
them.
you know.
No.
He didn't decide them. He knows them. This is not
Okay,
a subjectivist
so
theory.
it's
This
just
is
a
an
prop.
objectivist
Okay,
theory.
so it's in virtue of a property, it's
Yes.
good, and God knows all of it,
Yes.
and so he just tells
Yeah,
me
but
it's
property is just another word.
Congratulations. Oh my God, I hate you.
good. Okay, yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I'm fine with that, but I don't think that addressed anything I said. So
I don't understand what you don't understand. If there's a set of properties and one of them is the moral property and God knows it and can just tell you, you're done.
yeah, no, that's fine. But I
Why
don't
does
know
God
what
have-
goodness is.
But I think what God would have to do in this case is somehow give us an experience where we stood side on between our language and the essences of things and saw those correspondence relations. Because I think God just telling us is just providing us with more words.
Sure.
and
He
Yeah,
can
no,
give you
exactly.
the experiency thingy. There you go. He's
Yeah.
Okay,
done.
So,
then I
T-Jump.
agree. Me and T-Jump probably aren't far off on that then. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
So T-Jump, I took you to be making a semantic argument.
I'm not.
Just
I
so you
never,
know
ever,
why I was
ever
angry
make
at you.
semantics. Yes.
Yeah, but if you understand that I was like very frustrated at you because I took you to be making a semantic argument.
Yes, and that's
Okay.
I understand that's a confusion most people in this discussion make. And when I say moral realism, that means literally not semantic. Realism means literally not semantic. Realism is the opposite of a semantic argument in all
Yeah.
contexts.
So I would still need to. I'm not saying say it to me now, but when you say morality, like I would still need to know what you specifically mean, right?
We haven't even talked about my version at all. We've just been giving
No,
how
no.
to explain what it would mean to have objective morality. That's it.
I'm not saying you to explain it. I'm just saying there is still this like part where because you're saying like, hey, don't listen to the words I'm saying, listen to what I intend. And
Yes.
to do that, I would need to know what you intend, right?
Yes. Like
So
morality is
that
a law of physics.
will always be a semantic thing, right?
Sure, yes, but that's
Yeah,
why
yeah.
I said morality is like a law of physics. Then it should be understood at that point.
So the reason I got confused was when I was like, so let's say we find this law, and me and Max, we decided to call it the red glow law. Like that's a fine name for a law.
Stupid
And
name.
then I took you. Okay, I like the name. And then I took you to be saying like, no, that's actually the incorrect English word for the thing. And I was like, what? How can the word be wrong? It's just a label.
Yes, there's
And you were like, no, the correct label in the world is morality or something.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Oscar
this
was
is
talking
really
about speaker
confusing.
intention, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
so weird.
language is ambiguous. There are no objective meanings, of course.
I think you need to know what people intend, but most of the time we just intend the same thing because we were all
Oh.
trained to do this, right?
Well, I don't think there's any such thing that people intend. I just think that's, the linguistic practices. And
Sometimes I worry you go too
I
far.
think like me and T-Jump would agree on a lot of things. I'm just like sometimes I'm caught up in when he says it's like a law of physics. Like would that specific law just give me? It's like some physical like causal process that gives me the action guiding norm. Because like that just seems like, that
Action
seems kind
guiding
of-
is irrelevant. You don't need any action guiding at all.
Yeah.
That's irrelevant.
Oh yeah, then I just disagree with you. Because I know you're what is it like? You have the utopianism thing, and then you have the no like impositions on someone else's will. Yeah, I mean I just disagree with that. So, but that gets more into the actual like applied and normative theory, not the meta ethics.
Yeah, I think like I haven't met many other people that are realists, but they don't believe in oughts and shoulds and stuff like that. So always when someone tries to convince me of moral realism, like I try to make that part work as well. So then it's really confused where you're like, oh no, I don't believe in those things at all. Like they're just totally disconnected to reasons and stuff like that. You're like just talking, maybe there's a particle that does things to brain or something.
Yeah, it was just a hypothetical to try to explain what it would mean for realism. Should not be that hard at all.
I mean, should and ought is a very common part of realism, I think.
Some versions, but irrelevant.
Yeah, I'm a bit tired. I'm gonna head out.
Well, it is like past midnight for you, I think. So, or coming up to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
2 minutes,
For what
2
it's
minutes.
worth, like Oscar, I sort of knew what you were saying, right? Like, so I don't think it was just you being tired. Like, I sort of got the criticism. So.
Yeah, I think TJump is wrong, but I don't want to start something. Yeah. Have a good one.
I think
See
I'm
ya.
gonna leave too.
Good night. Yeah. Well, let's end the stream there then.
Sounds good.
Right. We'll see you around, Tom.
See ya.
It was eventful.
Yep. Definitely do this again sometime.
Yeah. Sure, man. Thanks
Talk
for
to you
coming
later.
by.